My family stole my inheritance and tried to frame me as the greedy one. I, 28, have been dealing with absolute chaos from my older sister Rachel, 32, and our Aunt Linda ever since my grandmother passed away 6 months ago. What they did to me still keeps me up at night, and I'm finally ready to tell this story, because I need people to understand just how calculated this whole thing was. My grandmother raised me from age 12 after my parents died in a car accident. Rachel was already in college by then, so she stayed with Aunt Linda. Grandma and I were incredibly close. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school, taught me everything I know about being a decent human being, and always told me that family loyalty was the most important thing in life. I believed her. 3 months before she died, Grandma sat me down and told me she was updating her will. She said she was leaving me the house and most of her savings because I'd been there for her, taking care of her during her illness while working full-time as a nurse. She wanted to make sure I was set up. Rachel would get some money and jewelry, but the house was mine. Grandma made me promise not to tell anyone until after she was gone, because she didn't want drama while she was still alive. I kept that promise. When Grandma died, the funeral was hard but normal. Rachel cried, Aunt Linda gave speeches about what an amazing woman Grandma was, and I held it together because someone had to handle the arrangements. The lawyer scheduled the will reading for 2 weeks later. That's when everything went to hell. The lawyer read out the will exactly as Grandma told me. I got the house and about $150,000 in savings. Rachel got $30,000 and all the jewelry, which was worth at least another $20,000. Fair? Maybe not completely equal, but Grandma had her reasons. Rachel's face went bright red. She stood up and started screaming at me right there in the lawyer's office. Called me a manipulative snake, said I'd obviously brainwashed Grandma in her final years, accused me of elder abuse. Aunt Linda backed her up immediately, saying there was no way Grandma would have done this unless I'd somehow coerced her. The lawyer tried to calm them down, explained that Grandma was completely lucid when she made these decisions, and he documented everything properly, but they wouldn't listen. They left, threatening to contest the will. I figured they'd calm down once they realized they had no case. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from Adult Protective Services. Someone had filed a report claiming I'd been financially abusing my grandmother before she died, stealing from her accounts, isolating her from family. I was being investigated. My nursing license was suddenly at risk. I couldn't believe it. I knew immediately it was Rachel and Linda, but I had no proof. Then my coworkers started getting strange calls asking about my character. My supervisor pulled me aside and told me someone had contacted the hospital claiming I'd been stealing medications. Nothing they could prove, they said, but they had to take it seriously. My entire life was being systematically destroyed, and I knew exactly who was behind it. The investigation into the abuse allegations took 3 weeks, and they were the worst weeks of my entire life. I had to provide bank statements, medical records, witness testimonies, everything. Meanwhile, Rachel was posting on Facebook about how heartbroken she was that her grandmother had been taken advantage of in her final days. Family members I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly messaging me asking what really happened. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have. He cost $5,000 just for the retainer, but he said these cases could get ugly and I needed protection. He was right. Rachel and Linda formally contested the will, claiming Grandma lacked mental capacity and that I'd used undue influence. Their lawyer sent me a settlement offer. Give them each $50,000 and we'd call it even. I refused. That money was for my future, for the family I wanted to have someday, for everything Grandma worked so hard to give me. That's when I found out about the recordings. My lawyer did some digging and discovered that Grandma's lawyer had actually recorded their conversations when updating the will, which is legal in our state with one-party consent. In those recordings, Grandma explicitly stated that she was of sound mind, that nobody was pressuring her, and that she was making these decisions because I'd sacrificed years of my life to care for her while Rachel barely visited. She even mentioned that she knew Rachel might be upset, but that this was what she wanted. The Adult Protective Services investigation concluded with no findings. They determined all of Grandma's finances were properly managed, and there was zero evidence of abuse or exploitation. My nursing supervisor called me in and apologized, said the hospital found no merit to any claims against me. Everything was dismissed. But Rachel and Linda didn't stop. They started showing up at the house, Grandma's house, my house now. They'd bang on the door at weird hours, sometimes late at night. Rachel would scream through the door about how I stole her inheritance, how I was a thief and a liar. Neighbors started asking questions. I called the police twice, but they'd leave before officers arrived. I was exhausted. Grieving my grandmother, fighting legal battles, defending my reputation, and dealing with harassment. My lawyer said we had a strong case against their will contest, but it would take months to resolve. He also said I should consider getting a restraining order, but that would cost more money and more time. Then I remembered something. Grandma kept journals, detailed journals, for over 40 years. I'd seen them in her closet but never read them because they felt private. But desperate times called for desperate measures. I spent an entire weekend reading through the last 10 years of entries. What I found was devastating and perfect. Grandma had documented everything. Every missed birthday Rachel skipped, every time Aunt Linda asked for money and never paid it back, every conversation where they made it clear they were too busy for her. She wrote about how I was the only one who called her every day, who took her to doctor's appointments, who sat with her during chemo. She wrote about conversations where Rachel specifically told her that the house should be sold and the money split equally, not understanding that Grandma wanted me to have a home. She even wrote about a conversation where Aunt Linda suggested putting Grandma in a nursing home to make things easier for everyone. These journals were dated, detailed, and in Grandma's handwriting. They were gold for my case. My lawyer was ecstatic. He immediately filed them as evidence and sent copies to Rachel's legal team. The harassment stopped within days. Suddenly, Rachel wasn't posting on Facebook anymore. Aunt Linda stopped calling other family members. Their lawyer requested a meeting, and my lawyer told me it smelled like surrender. The meeting happened at my lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning. Rachel showed up looking exhausted, wouldn't make eye contact. Aunt Linda kept clearing her throat and fidgeting with her purse. Their lawyer did most of the talking, explained that after reviewing the new evidence, they were withdrawing the will contest. They acknowledged that Grandma was clearly of sound mind and that her decisions should be respected. My lawyer wasn't satisfied with just that. He'd prepared a document for them to sign, admitting their harassment, the false reports to APS and my hospital, and agreeing to cease all contact with me. If they signed it, I wouldn't pursue legal action against them for defamation and harassment. If they didn't sign, we'd file a countersuit that would drag them through discovery and depositions and cost them way more than they'd ever get from the will. Rachel started crying. Real tears this time, not the performative grief she'd shown at the funeral. She said she was sorry, that she'd been hurt and acted badly. Aunt Linda tried to argue, said this was all excessive, but their lawyer cut her off and told them to sign. They signed. I thought that would be the end of it. They left, I got my house, case closed. But then, 2 months later, I got a Facebook message from Rachel's daughter Emma, my niece, who's 19. We'd never been close because Rachel always kept her away from me, but Emma said she needed to talk to me about something important regarding the family. We met at a coffee shop near her college. Emma looked nervous, kept stirring her coffee without drinking it. Finally, she told me that the will contest wasn't just about money. Rachel and Aunt Linda had planned the whole thing from the beginning, even before Grandma died. Emma had overheard conversations where they talked about how they'd challenge anything that gave me more than them. They'd discussed making reports to get my nursing license revoked, so I'd be desperate enough to settle. It was all premeditated. But here's the worst part. Emma told me that Rachel had visited Grandma alone one time about 2 months before she died. Rachel had tried to convince Grandma to change her will, told her that leaving everything to me would tear the family apart. Grandma refused and asked Rachel to leave. Rachel came home furious that day, and that's when Aunt Linda and Rachel started planning their strategy for after Grandma died. Emma said she was telling me this because she felt guilty watching what her mom did to me. She also said she was worried because Rachel had been talking about me again recently, making comments about how I didn't deserve to be happy in her grandmother's house. I didn't know what to do with this information. The legal battle was over. They'd signed agreements. But knowing they'd planned this, that they'd strategized about destroying my life before Grandma was even gone, made everything feel different. Last week I found out why Rachel had been talking about me. She'd been diagnosed with a serious medical condition that requires expensive treatment, and her insurance isn't covering everything. She needs money. Aunt Linda called me, first time since the lawyer's office, asking if we could put the past behind us, because family should help family in times of crisis. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to be the bigger person, the person Grandma raised me to be. But another part of me remembers every sleepless night, every panic attack about losing my nursing license, every moment they tried to destroy everything I'd worked for. I keep thinking about what Grandma wrote in those journals, about how she knew they'd act this way, about how she wanted me protected. I still have the house. I live here now, surrounded by Grandma's things and her memory. Sometimes I sit in her favorite chair and wonder what she'd tell me to do. The restraining order documents my lawyer drew up are still sitting on my kitchen counter, unsigned. I have the power now, the choice of whether to help or walk away. Rachel's daughter Emma has been texting me asking if I've made a decision, saying her mom's treatments start soon. My sister turned my entire family against me with lies, then asked me for a kidney. Let me tell you about my older sister Natalie, 34, and how she managed to completely isolate me from our entire family before coming back asking for help when she needed something from me. I'm 30, and what she's put me through over the past 5 years has been absolutely devastating. Natalie and I grew up competitive with each other. She was always the pretty one, the popular one, the one who could charm anyone. I was quieter, more academic, had fewer friends but deeper relationships. Our parents loved us both, but Natalie always seemed to get more attention just by nature of her personality. When I was 23, I started dating someone Natalie had briefly dated in high school. His name was Marcus, and he and Natalie had gone out maybe 3 times 7 years earlier, before mutually deciding they were better as friends. Marcus and I met through mutual friends, hit it off, and started a relationship. I told Natalie before our first official date because I wanted to be respectful. She said it was totally fine, that she barely remembered dating him. That's when Natalie started her campaign against me. She began telling family members that I'd stolen her boyfriend, that Marcus had been the love of her life, and I'd betrayed her. Our parents sat me down and asked why I'd pursue someone Natalie had feelings for. I tried to explain it was 7 years ago and barely a relationship, but Natalie was so convincing with her tears and hurt feelings. Marcus and I got engaged after 2 years. Natalie ramped up her campaign. She told our extended family I was manipulative and had always been jealous of her. She told cousins I'd sabotaged her relationships out of spite. She told our grandmother I'd been stealing from her purse when I was younger, complete lies that made me look like a terrible person. The worst part was how good Natalie was at playing victim. She'd cry to our mom about how much my betrayal hurt, how she could barely function knowing her sister was marrying the man she'd never gotten over. Our mom started taking her side, suggesting Marcus and I postpone the wedding to let Natalie heal. Our dad stayed neutral but clearly felt bad for Natalie. By the time Marcus and I got married, half the family didn't attend. Those who did come were cold to me, treating me like I'd done something unforgivable. Natalie didn't come at all, said it would be too painful. She posted on social media that day about healing from betrayal and moving forward, and family members commented with support for her. The next 3 years were lonely. Family gatherings were awkward when I attended, and eventually I stopped going. Natalie had successfully positioned herself as the wronged party and me as the selfish sister. Marcus was confused and hurt by how my family treated us, but we tried to build our own life separate from the drama. Natalie got married 2 years ago to someone she'd been dating for 6 months. Big wedding, everyone attended, our parents paid for most of it. I wasn't invited. I heard about it through social media posts from cousins. Marcus and I had been together for 5 years at that point, married for 3, and my own family didn't think I deserved an invitation to my sister's wedding. I tried to make peace several times. Sent Natalie texts saying I missed her, that whatever had happened between us wasn't worth losing our relationship. She'd either ignore them or respond with something about how I'd never understood the pain I caused her. Our mom said I needed to give Natalie more time, that betrayal takes years to heal from. Meanwhile, Natalie continued spreading stories about me. She told people I was jealous of her marriage, that I'd tried to sabotage her wedding planning, that I'd contacted her husband saying inappropriate things. None of it was true, but people believed her. My reputation in the family was completely destroyed. Marcus and I had our first child a year ago, a daughter named Riley. I sent birth announcements to family members, hoping it might be an olive branch. Most didn't respond. Natalie posted congratulations on Facebook, but never reached out privately. Our parents came to visit once for a few hours, seemed uncomfortable the whole time, and left early. 6 months ago, Natalie was diagnosed with kidney disease. Progressive, genetic, would eventually require a transplant. Our parents got tested to be donors, but neither was a match. Extended family members got tested, and nobody matched. The doctors said siblings had the best chance of being compatible. Natalie called me for the first time in 3 years. Didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge any of the history between us. Just said she had kidney disease and needed me to get tested as a potential donor. Said it was a family emergency and I needed to help. I was in shock. After years of lies, isolation, and character assassination, she wanted my kidney. I told her I needed time to think about it. She got angry, said thinking about it meant I was willing to let her die, that I was proving everything she'd ever said about me being selfish was true. Our parents called next. They'd apparently known about Natalie's diagnosis for months and hadn't told me. Now they were calling to pressure me into getting tested. Our mom cried, saying I couldn't let my sister die over old grudges. Our dad said, family helps family, no matter what the history is. I asked our mom if she understood what Natalie had done to me, how she'd turned everyone against me with lies. Our mom said that whatever happened between us wasn't relevant when someone's life was at stake. She said I needed to be the bigger person. I got tested. Not because of them, but because I needed to know if I was a match before making any decisions. Turns out, I'm a perfect match. 6 out of 6 antigens. Best possible compatibility. The transplant coordinator called it remarkably good luck. When I told Natalie I was a match, she acted like it was settled. Started talking about surgery dates, recovery timelines, how grateful she was that this worked out. Never actually thanked me or acknowledged what she was asking me to do. Just assumed I'd donate because we matched. I told her we needed to talk first. About everything that had happened, about the lies she'd told, about the family relationships she'd destroyed. She said we could talk about all that after the transplant, that her health was the priority right now, and we couldn't waste time on drama. That word, drama, made something snap in me. 5 years of isolation and lies was drama to her. She'd systematically destroyed my reputation, my family relationships, and my sense of belonging, and she called it drama. I told her I wasn't donating my kidney without some serious conversations first. Natalie told our parents I was holding her kidney hostage for an apology. Our mom called me selfish and cruel. Our dad said he was disappointed in who I'd become. Extended family members started messaging me saying I should be ashamed, that refusing to save my sister's life was unforgivable. Nobody asked about my side of the story. Nobody questioned why I might be hesitant. Nobody acknowledged that Natalie had spent years lying about me. They just saw a sick woman and a healthy sister refusing to help. My husband Marcus has been my only support through this. He thinks I should refuse to donate, says Natalie doesn't deserve my kidney after what she's done. He's worried about the risks to my health, about what happens if I need a kidney later in life, about setting myself on fire to keep warm someone who's tried to destroy me. But she's still my sister, and she's dying. The doctors say she has maybe 2 years before she needs dialysis, maybe 5 years total without a transplant. With my kidney, she could live a normal lifespan. I asked Natalie to come over and talk, just the two of us. She refused, said she wasn't strong enough emotionally to rehash the past. She wanted me to donate, and then maybe we could work on our relationship during recovery. No accountability before getting what she needed. Our parents suggested family therapy. I agreed. Natalie said she was too sick for therapy right now, that her focus needed to be on physical health. She wanted the transplant scheduled within 3 months, before her kidney function declined more. The transplant coordinator told me I could back out any time up until surgery, that donors who feel coerced often have psychological issues afterward. She asked me directly if I was being pressured, and I said yes. She said that was a red flag, and suggested more counseling before proceeding. Natalie's latest text says she's scheduled the surgery for 8 weeks from now. Says she put my name down as the confirmed donor. Says she loves me and can't wait to have her sister back in her life after the transplant brings us closer together. I haven't confirmed anything with the transplant team. Natalie doesn't know I can still refuse. Our parents think it's happening. The family thinks I've finally done the right thing. Marcus thinks I'm making a huge mistake. The surgery date is 8 weeks away, and I still don't know what I'm going to do. My aunt convinced my dying grandmother to change her will days before she passed. The situation with my Aunt Helen, 56, has completely torn apart what's left of our family after my grandmother's death last year. I'm 28, and what Helen did in my grandmother's final days is something I'll never be able to forgive. My grandmother raised me from age 8 after my mom died in a car accident. My dad wasn't in the picture, so it was just me and Grandma for most of my childhood. She worked as a nurse for 40 years, saved carefully, and owned her home outright, plus had about $200,000 in savings. She always told me the house would be mine someday because I was the one who'd been there with her. Helen is my mom's older sister. She lived across the country and visited maybe once every 2 years. She'd call on holidays and Grandma's birthday, but they weren't particularly close. Helen had her own family, a successful career in real estate, and seemed to be doing well financially. She never needed anything from Grandma, and Grandma never expected much from her. When Grandma was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months ago, I moved back home to take care of her. I was working remotely as a software developer, so I could manage my job while being her primary caregiver. The cancer progressed quickly, and Grandma declined over the course of a year. Helen visited twice during Grandma's illness. Both times were brief, maybe 3 days each. She'd stay in a hotel, visit for a few hours in the afternoon, and then leave. She seemed uncomfortable around the medical equipment and would make excuses to step out when nurses came for treatments. I understood death isn't easy for everyone, so I didn't judge her for the short visits. Grandma's will had been the same for 10 years. Everything split between Helen and me, with me getting the house specifically because I'd lived there and taken care of her. Grandma had talked to me about it multiple times, wanted to make sure I understood her reasoning. The house was worth about $350,000, and with her savings and life insurance, the total estate was around $600,000. I'd get the house plus half of everything else. Helen would get her half in cash and investments. 3 weeks before Grandma died, Helen showed up unannounced. Said she'd taken leave from work to spend time with Grandma in her final days. She checked into a hotel, but was at the house from early morning until late evening every day. I was grateful for the help and the company. Grandma was heavily medicated by then, in and out of lucidity, mostly sleeping. Helen would sit with her for hours, talking quietly when Grandma was awake. I thought she was finally stepping up as a daughter, saying goodbye properly. I had no idea what she was actually doing. Grandma died on a Tuesday morning, peaceful, in her sleep, exactly how she wanted. Helen and I were both there. We cried together, made arrangements together, planned the funeral together. I thought we were united in grief. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. That's when everything fell apart. The lawyer read out a will I'd never seen before, dated 1 week before Grandma died. In this new will, everything went to Helen. The house, the savings, the life insurance, everything. I got nothing except some jewelry and personal items. I thought there was a mistake. The lawyer confirmed it was Grandma's signature, properly witnessed, completely legal. Helen had brought Grandma to a lawyer during one of her afternoon visits when I was working. She'd had Grandma sign a new will, leaving everything to her. When I confronted Helen, she said Grandma had changed her mind in her final days. She said Grandma felt guilty that Helen had to take time off work and wanted to compensate her for the sacrifice. She said Grandma had been clear-minded when she made the decision, and it was what she wanted. I knew that was impossible. Grandma's oncologist had documented her declining mental state. She was on heavy pain medication and had been confused and disoriented for weeks. There's no way she understood what she was signing. I hired a lawyer and contested the will. We subpoenaed Grandma's medical records showing her mental state at the time she supposedly changed her will. We got testimony from her doctors, her nurses, and her hospice workers, all saying she lacked the mental capacity to make major legal decisions in her final weeks. Helen's lawyer produced the witnesses from the will signing, 2 people who worked at the law firm Helen had found. They testified Grandma seemed lucid during the brief meeting, that she clearly stated she wanted to leave everything to Helen, and that she signed of her own free will. The legal battle lasted 8 months. During that time, Helen moved into Grandma's house, the house I'd grown up in. She started selling off Grandma's belongings, redecorating, making it hers. She acted like she'd won some prize instead of inheriting from her dead mother. My lawyer found the breakthrough we needed. Helen had searched online for how to change a will for someone with dementia 3 days before taking Grandma to that lawyer. She'd also researched testamentary capacity requirements and challenging undue influence. Her search history showed she'd planned the whole thing, researching how to technically make it legal while Grandma was dying. We also found financial records showing Helen was in serious debt. She'd lost money in bad real estate investments and owed over $300,000 to various creditors. She needed Grandma's money desperately and saw the cancer diagnosis as an opportunity. The judge ruled the new will was invalid due to lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. Helen had taken advantage of a dying woman in a vulnerable state to enrich herself. The original will was reinstated. Everything went back to how Grandma had intended it. Helen was ordered to return everything she'd taken from the estate, including items she'd already sold. She had to pay my legal fees, about $45,000, plus court costs. She also had to move out of the house within 30 days. Helen didn't have the money to pay back what she owed. She'd already spent about $80,000 of Grandma's money paying down her debts. The court put liens on her assets, garnished her wages, and gave her a payment plan. She'll be paying back the estate for years. I got the house back, but Helen had gutted it. She'd sold Grandma's antique furniture, her china collection, her jewelry that had sentimental value. Things that couldn't be replaced were just gone. The house felt empty and wrong without Grandma's presence and belongings. Our extended family took sides. Some people believed Helen's version that Grandma really did want to leave everything to her. Others thought Helen was a monster who'd exploited a dying woman. Family gatherings became impossible, with people refusing to attend if the other side was there. Helen's financial situation got worse. She lost her real estate license during the legal battle due to ethics violations. She had to file for bankruptcy and lost her home. She moved in with one of our cousins who felt sorry for her. I sold Grandma's house 6 months ago. I couldn't live there anymore, not after everything that happened. Too many bad memories overlaying the good ones. I used the money to buy a smaller place across town and put the rest in savings. Last month, Helen reached out through a mutual cousin asking if we could talk. She said she wanted to apologize, to explain herself, to try to make amends. The cousin said Helen was in therapy, dealing with her financial issues, and wanted to take accountability for what she'd done. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say, to understand why she did it. But another part knows that no explanation will change what happened. She exploited my dying grandmother for money. She desecrated Grandma's final wishes and tried to steal everything from me. The cousin has texted 3 times now saying Helen is serious about making amends. Helen apparently wrote me a letter that the cousin has, but won't give me unless I agree to read it. Helen's therapist supposedly suggested this as part of her recovery process. I keep thinking about Grandma and what she would want me to do. She always preached forgiveness and family unity, but she also trusted me to honor her wishes after she was gone, and Helen tried to destroy that trust for personal gain. The letter is apparently sitting at our cousin's house waiting for me. Helen wants to meet in person if I'm willing after I read it. I haven't decided if I'm going to do either of those things. My brother used my identity to start a business and left me with his debt. What my younger brother Connor, 26, did to me has completely ruined my financial life, and I'm only now starting to get payback for the mess he created. I'm 29, and this whole disaster started about 2 years ago when Connor decided he wanted to be an entrepreneur. Connor had always been the family favorite. Charismatic, funny, full of big ideas that never quite panned out. He'd started and abandoned at least 5 different business ventures by the time he was 25. Online store, food truck, app development, drop shipping, cryptocurrency trading. None of them worked out, and he'd borrowed money from everyone in the family that never got paid back. I was the boring, responsible one. Worked in accounting, paid my bills on time, built good credit, saved money. Connor and I were close despite our differences. We'd grab beers together. I'd listen to his latest business idea. He'd joke about me being too cautious. I trusted him. 2 years ago, Connor told me he was finally onto something real. He wanted to start a digital marketing agency and had clients ready to sign. He just needed to establish the business properly, get an LLC, open business accounts, all the official stuff. He asked if he could use my address as the business address since he was living with our parents and wanted to look professional. I said yes. It seemed harmless. Connor set up his LLC with my address listed. I got some mail for the business occasionally and would forward it to him. He seemed excited, said things were going well, showed me contracts with clients. I was happy for him. 6 months later, I started getting calls from collection agencies. Credit cards I'd never opened, business loans I'd never taken out, payment demands for services I'd never used. My credit score dropped 200 points in 3 months. I had no idea what was happening. Turns out Connor had been opening credit accounts using my personal information. He'd used my social security number, my date of birth, my employment information. He'd applied for business credit cards in the LLC's name but personally guaranteed with my credit. He'd taken out a $75,000 business loan from an online lender using my identity. All of it went to funding his marketing agency. When I confronted Connor, he said it was temporary. The business was doing well, but cash flow was tight. Once the big clients paid their invoices, he'd pay everything back and close the accounts. He acted like I was overreacting about some short-term debt that would be resolved soon. He promised everything would be fine within 2 months. It wasn't fine. Connor's marketing agency was failing. The clients he'd signed were small businesses who couldn't pay what he'd promised them he'd charge. He'd overspent on office space, equipment, and staff. The $75,000 loan was gone, spent on expenses that generated no real revenue. The collection calls intensified. I was getting 15 calls per day demanding payment on accounts I'd never authorized. My credit cards got declined. My car loan application was rejected. I was trying to buy a house and suddenly couldn't qualify for a mortgage because my debt-to-income ratio was destroyed by Connor's fraud. I went to the police and filed a report for identity theft. The detective said I'd need to provide evidence that I didn't authorize the accounts, which meant I'd have to press charges against Connor. If I wanted to dispute the debts and fix my credit, I had to prosecute my own brother. Connor begged me not to do it. Our parents got involved, said I'd ruin Connor's life over a business mistake. They offered to help pay back some of the money if I'd work out a payment plan instead of involving law enforcement. They could contribute maybe $10,000, which wouldn't even make a dent in the $95,000 Connor owed across all the fraudulent accounts. I filed a police report and disputed every fraudulent account. The creditors wanted proof of identity theft, which meant police reports and affidavits. Connor's business collapsed completely within 2 weeks of me reporting the fraud. His clients left when they found out the business was under investigation. Connor moved back in with our parents, who blamed me for destroying his entrepreneurial dreams. Our mom said I should have given him more time to pay things back, that family doesn't send family to jail. Our dad stopped talking to me entirely. The investigation took 4 months. Detectives found emails where Connor had used my information to apply for credit, fake documents he'd created with my forged signature. IP addresses showing the applications came from his devices. The evidence was overwhelming, and Connor couldn't deny it. The prosecutor offered Connor a plea deal. Plead guilty to identity theft and fraud, pay restitution, get probation instead of prison time. Connor's lawyer said if he went to trial and lost, he'd face up to 10 years. Connor took the deal. He pled guilty to 5 counts of fraud and identity theft. He got 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, and was ordered to pay $95,000 in restitution plus my legal fees. The creditors agreed to remove the fraudulent accounts from my credit report once the criminal case was resolved. My credit is still recovering. It's been 18 months since the accounts were removed, and my score is finally back above 700. But the damage cost me the house I wanted to buy. Someone else bought it while I was dealing with Connor's mess. Connor lives with our parents still, working at a grocery store making $16 per hour. The restitution payments come out of his paycheck automatically, about $200 per month. At that rate, he'll be paying me back for the next 40 years. He's not allowed to start any businesses while on probation. Our parents are still angry with me for prosecuting Connor. They hosted Thanksgiving last year and didn't invite me. Christmas card came addressed to everyone except me. When my aunt got married this summer, I was seated at a table far from family because our mom didn't want Connor to feel uncomfortable seeing me. Connor sent me a letter 3 months ago, apologizing and asking if we could talk. He said he understood why I did what I did, that he'd been wrong to use my identity, and that he wanted to eventually rebuild our relationship. He asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. I didn't respond. Part of me appreciated the apology, but another part of me is still furious. He destroyed my credit, cost me my dream house, made me the family villain, and all because he wanted to play businessman without using his own terrible credit. Last week I found out Connor is dating someone seriously. Her name is Amy. They've been together for 6 months. Our mom mentioned it casually during a rare phone call, said Amy was really sweet and good for Connor. She suggested I should meet Amy at some point, start being part of the family again. Then I found out the real reason our mom wanted me to meet Amy. Connor had proposed to her. They're getting engaged officially next month. Our parents are thrilled, already planning an engagement party. Connor apparently told Amy a sanitized version of our situation, saying we had a business disagreement that got out of hand. Amy comes from money. Her parents are wealthy, and she's mentioned to our mom that her dad might help Connor start a new business once his probation is over. Our mom thinks this is wonderful, that Connor finally has a real opportunity to succeed with proper financial backing. I looked Amy up on social media. She seems nice, works in event planning, comes from a good family. She has no idea what Connor is actually capable of or what he did to me. She thinks he's just an ambitious guy who had one failed business and is working on getting back on his feet. I have all the court documents, the plea agreement, the restitution order, the evidence of fraud. I could send it all to Amy anonymously, let her know exactly who she's marrying. Connor would know it came from me, and our family would never forgive me for it. But Amy deserves to know the truth before she legally ties herself to someone with a criminal record for financial fraud. She deserves to know her future husband stole nearly $100,000 using his own brother's identity and only stopped because he got caught. The engagement party is in 3 weeks. I haven't been invited, but I know when and where it's happening. I have Amy's email address from her public business website. The court documents are saved on my computer, ready to send. I still haven't decided if I'm going to do it. My brother-in-law secretly bought my business out from under me using inside info. This whole disaster with my sister's husband, Marcus, 40, has basically cost me everything I built over the past decade. I'm 37, and what Marcus pulled off while pretending to be supportive family has left me financially ruined and questioning who I can trust. I started a specialty coffee roasting business 9 years ago. Started small, roasting beans in my garage and selling at farmers markets. By year 5, I had a retail location and was supplying 20 local cafes. By year 7, I was doing $800,000 annually with plans to expand to a second location. The business was my pride and accomplishment, built from absolute nothing. Marcus married my younger sister Diane 6 years ago. He worked in commercial real estate and seemed successful. He was always interested in my business, asking detailed questions about operations, profit margins, suppliers, and growth plans. I thought he was just being a supportive brother-in-law who liked talking shop. 2 years ago, I started looking to expand. I'd found a perfect second location in a trendy neighborhood and was negotiating with the property owner. The lease terms were favorable, the space was ideal, and I was excited about the growth opportunity. I mentioned all this to Marcus during family dinners, asked his advice about commercial leases since that was his expertise. Marcus reviewed my proposed lease and suggested some modifications. He knew my revenue numbers, my expansion budget, my entire business plan. He gave advice that seemed helpful at the time. I trusted him because he was family and supposedly looking out for my interests. Then the property owner suddenly told me they'd accepted another offer. Someone had swooped in with a better proposal and locked up the space before I could finalize anything. I was disappointed, but figured that's how business goes sometimes. I started looking for alternative locations. 3 months later, a new coffee shop opened in the exact space I'd been trying to lease. The branding was suspiciously similar to mine. The business model was nearly identical. They approached several of my wholesale clients and undercut my prices. Within 6 months, this competitor had stolen 30% of my business. I did some digging and discovered the owner of the new shop was a company called Meridian Hospitality, LLC. The registered agent was Marcus. My brother-in-law had used everything I'd told him to create a competing business in the location I'd wanted. When I confronted Marcus, he acted like it was just business, said the coffee industry was competitive, and he'd seen an opportunity. He claimed he'd developed his concept independently, and the similarities to my business were coincidental. He said I was being paranoid and emotional about normal market competition. Diane initially defended Marcus, said he'd been planning his coffee shop for over a year, and that I was accusing him unfairly. But when I showed her the timeline, the lease negotiations, and how Marcus had used information I'd shared privately, she started questioning his story. I hired a lawyer to investigate. We discovered Marcus had done way more than just open a competing shop. He'd contacted my suppliers using information about my accounts and negotiated better rates by promising higher volume. He'd approached my wholesale clients with inside knowledge about my pricing and undercut me strategically. He'd used confidential information I'd shared with him to systematically target my business. The most damaging discovery was that Marcus had used my business plan almost verbatim. My lawyer compared the pitch deck I'd shown Marcus with the materials Meridian Hospitality had used to secure funding. Whole sections were copied directly. Financial projections, marketing strategies, operational procedures, everything I'd developed over 9 years was stolen and repackaged as his original concept. My business started hemorrhaging money. I'd lost key wholesale accounts. My retail location was seeing reduced traffic because Marcus's shop was pulling customers, and I couldn't compete with his lower prices because he'd stolen my supplier relationships. Within a year of Marcus opening his shop, my revenue dropped 60%. I had to lay off 3 employees, then 2 more. Eventually, it was just me running the retail location alone, roasting beans at night and handling sales during the day. The business I'd spent a decade building was collapsing because my brother-in-law had used my trust against me. Diane finally confronted Marcus with all the evidence. He admitted he'd used information from our conversations but insisted he hadn't done anything illegal. Said business intelligence was gathered from all sources, and I'd been naive to share so much. He claimed I should be grateful because his success proved the market opportunity I'd identified was real. Diane filed for divorce. She was horrified that Marcus had systematically destroyed her brother's business using family connections. Marcus acted like she was overreacting, said couples disagree about business ethics all the time. She moved out within 2 weeks. My lawyer filed a lawsuit for misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of confidential relationship, and unfair business practices. The case was strong because I could prove Marcus had access to my proprietary information solely because of our family relationship, and had used it to directly compete against me. The lawsuit revealed even more damage. Marcus had been bad-mouthing me to potential investors, telling them my business was poorly managed and that his operation was superior. He'd used my reputation and relationships in the industry to build credibility for himself while undermining me. He'd positioned himself as the legitimate operator and me as the struggling amateur. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that business information shared casually at family dinners couldn't be considered confidential. My lawyer proved I'd explicitly told Marcus things in confidence, asked for his advice as family, and had a reasonable expectation that he wouldn't use that information to compete against me. The trial took 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails showed Marcus had copied my business plan almost word for word. Testimony from suppliers confirmed Marcus had used details about my accounts to negotiate his own deals. Former employees testified they'd seen Marcus taking notes during family gatherings when I discussed business strategies. The jury awarded me $450,000 in damages for lost business and misappropriation of trade secrets. Marcus was also ordered to pay my legal fees of $120,000. The court issued an injunction requiring Marcus to cease using any business practices, branding elements, or strategies derived from my confidential information. But the money couldn't undo the damage. My business was barely surviving by the time the verdict came in. I'd lost my momentum. My reputation had been damaged by Marcus's smear campaign, and my customer base had fractured. The $450,000 judgment helped, but couldn't restore what I'd lost. Marcus filed for bankruptcy 6 months after the verdict. Meridian Hospitality LLC was dissolved, and his coffee shop closed. He couldn't afford the judgment, had overextended himself financially, and his reputation was destroyed once the truth came out about how he'd built his business through theft. I got about $200,000 from the bankruptcy proceedings, a fraction of what I was owed. Marcus lost everything too, his business, his marriage, his reputation. But he'd already killed my business in the process of building his, so we both ended up in ruins. I closed my coffee shop 8 months ago. After 9 years of building it, the doors closed permanently because I couldn't recover from what Marcus had done. I sold the equipment, broke the lease, and walked away from everything I'd worked for. Diane feels tremendous guilt, even though none of this was her fault. She's been supportive, but our relationship is strained because every conversation reminds us both of what Marcus did. Family gatherings are impossible because my parents don't know how to handle the situation. Marcus reached out through a mutual acquaintance last month. He's apparently in therapy and wants to make amends. He acknowledges what he did was wrong and says he's spent the past year understanding the damage he caused. He asked if I'd be willing to meet so he could apologize properly. Diane thinks I should hear him out. She says Marcus is genuinely remorseful and that meeting might give me closure. My parents agree. They want some path toward family healing, even though they acknowledge Marcus's actions were unforgivable. But I spent 9 years building something from nothing, and Marcus destroyed it in less than 2 years, using information I gave him because I trusted him as family. The coffee business was my identity, my financial security, and my future. Now I'm 37, starting over from scratch, working as a consultant for other people's businesses instead of running my own. I'm working as a business consultant now, using my experience to help other small business owners avoid the mistakes I made. It pays the bills, but it's not the same as having my own operation. Every time I walk past the empty storefront where my shop used to be, I feel the loss all over again. The request to meet with Marcus is sitting in my inbox. He wants to apologize in person and discuss if there's any way he can make things right. The mutual acquaintance who reached out said Marcus seems genuinely changed and desperate for forgiveness. Part of me wants to tell him to never contact me again, but another part wonders if hearing his apology might help me move forward. I haven't been able to let go of the anger and betrayal, and maybe confronting him directly would provide some resolution. I have until the end of the week to decide whether to respond. My cousin took credit for my work and got the promotion I deserved. I'm 29, and my cousin Derek, 32, just got fired from the job he stole from me, and watching his life fall apart has been the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. I know that sounds harsh, but you need to understand what this guy did to me. Derek and I both went into software engineering. We're both good at it, but I've always been better. Not trying to brag, just stating facts. In college, I had better grades, better internships, more job offers. Derek struggled more, took an extra year to graduate, and ended up at a mediocre company after school. 3 years ago, I was working at a major tech company in a senior developer role. I'd been there for 4 years and was up for a promotion to team lead. I'd been working on a major project for 8 months, a complete overhaul of our client management system. It was complex, innovative, and if successful, would save the company millions annually. Derek had been job hunting and asked if my company was hiring. I got him an interview, vouched for him, and he got hired onto a different team. I was happy to help family. He seemed grateful, kept thanking me for the opportunity. 2 months before my project was supposed to launch, Derek started asking questions about it. Said he was curious about the technical aspects, wanted to learn from my approach. I showed him my work, explained my methodology, even gave him access to some of my documentation because I trusted him. We were family. The week before my presentation to senior leadership about the project, I got food poisoning. Bad enough that I was hospitalized for 3 days. I told my manager I needed to postpone the presentation. He said they couldn't wait. The executives had already scheduled it, and asked if someone else could present on my behalf. I suggested my colleague Aaron, who'd been helping with testing. My manager said Derek had volunteered since he'd been asking about the project and understood the technical details. I was too sick to argue and figured it would be fine. Derek would present my work, I'd get the credit, everyone would see what I'd built. Derek presented the project as his own, told the executives he'd been developing it, that it was his architecture, his innovation. My manager wasn't in the presentation, and the executives didn't know any better. By the time I got back to work, Derek was being praised company-wide for revolutionizing our systems. When I tried to explain that it was my project, Derek said we'd collaborated and he'd made significant contributions that elevated my initial ideas. My manager believed Derek's version. Derek had created a paper trail while I was sick, sending himself emails about the project, documenting his supposed contributions. He'd covered his tracks perfectly. I looked like I was trying to take credit for collaborative work. Derek got promoted to team lead, the position I'd been working toward. He got a $30,000 raise and started managing a team of 5 developers. I stayed in my same role, now reporting to someone on Derek's level. The injustice of it made me physically ill. I tried going to HR with evidence that it was my project. I had my original design documents, my code commits, emails showing I'd been working on it for months before Derek even joined the company. HR said it looked like a professional disagreement, and they couldn't determine who contributed what. Derek's story had already been accepted as truth. Family dinners became unbearable. Derek would talk about his promotion, his team, his success. Our aunt would brag about him to everyone. My uncle said Derek had really found his calling. Nobody knew he'd stolen everything from me. When I tried to tell them, Derek said I was jealous and dealing with some personal issues. My own family believed him over me. I started documenting everything. Every line of code I wrote, every design decision, every contribution. I also started watching Derek's work closely. Turns out, without my ideas to steal, he was mediocre at best. His team started missing deadlines. Projects he led had bugs and performance issues. But he was good at talking, at taking credit, at managing up to executives while his team did the actual work. 6 months after his promotion, one of Derek's projects failed spectacularly. A system he'd supposedly designed crashed during a major client demo. The company lost a $2 million contract. Derek blamed his team, said they hadn't implemented his vision correctly. 2 developers from his team quit within a month. I'd been transferred to a different department by then, working on back-end infrastructure. My new manager actually appreciated my work, and I was thriving away from Derek's shadow. I got a small promotion and a raise, not what I deserved, but something. Then Derek made his biggest mistake. He pitched a new project to senior leadership, promising it would recover the lost client and bring in more business. The executives approved it with a big budget. Derek was assigned a larger team and given 6 months to deliver. He couldn't do it. The project was too complex for him, and this time he had no one to steal from. He started asking me for help, casual questions at first, then more desperate requests. I politely declined every time, said I was too busy with my own work. I watched him spiral. 3 months into the project, it was obvious Derek was failing. His team was confused about the direction, the code was a mess, and deadlines were being pushed back repeatedly. Derek started working crazy hours, trying to figure it out himself. He looked exhausted at family gatherings, stressed and defensive when anyone asked about work. The project missed its deadline, then missed the extended deadline. The client Derek was supposed to recover went with a competitor. Senior leadership started asking hard questions about Derek's capabilities and track record. Someone finally looked closely at the original project Derek had taken credit for, and noticed patterns that didn't match his current work quality. My old manager got pulled into a meeting about Derek's failing project. He started going through the original documentation and realized the coding style, the architecture decisions, everything matched my work, not Derek's. He checked the code repository and saw that 95% of the original commits were mine. He brought it to HR with evidence I'd been the actual creator. HR launched an internal investigation. They interviewed people on my old team, reviewed all the documentation, and examined the timeline. Derek's fraud fell apart under scrutiny. The emails he'd sent himself while I was sick were clearly backdated and desperate. His supposed contributions didn't match the commit history or design documents. Derek got fired 2 weeks ago for misconduct and falsifying his contributions. The company made him sign an agreement that he wouldn't seek unemployment or sue them. They didn't press charges, but they made it clear his reputation in the industry was done. Tech community is small, and word spreads fast about people who steal credit. I got called into a meeting with senior leadership. They apologized for not investigating my claims earlier and offered me Derek's old position as team lead, plus back pay for the raise I should have gotten 3 years ago. It came out to about $90,000 in back pay. They also promised a substantial bonus if I could salvage Derek's failed project. I accepted the position. I'm now managing a team and working on fixing the disaster Derek left behind. It's a lot of work, but it feels good to finally get recognition for what I can actually do. Derek has been unemployed since getting fired. He's applying everywhere, but his references from our company are destroying him.
Our aunt asked if I could help him find a new job since I have industry connections.
I said no. She called me petty and said family should help family. I reminded her that Derek didn't think about family when he stole from me. Last week, Derek showed up at my apartment, said he was sorry, that he'd made terrible choices and let ambition cloud his judgment. He asked if I could tell our former company to give him a neutral reference so he could find work. His savings are running out and he's getting desperate. I told him I'd think about it. Honestly, I don't know if I will. Part of me feels like he's suffered enough, lost his job and his reputation. But another part remembers 3 years of watching him get praised for my work, 3 years of being overlooked while he climbed a ladder built on my stolen ideas. He's called me twice since then. I haven't answered. His car got repossessed yesterday according to a mutual friend. He might lose his apartment next month if he doesn't find income. The family is split on whether I should help him, with some saying I should be the bigger person, and others saying he made his bed. I still haven't decided what to do. My cousins framed me for theft to get me written out of my grandparents' will. Everything fell apart with my cousins Melissa, 29, and her brother Carson, 31, about 3 years ago when they orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy my relationship with our grandparents. I'm 27 now, and what they did almost cost me everything before I finally proved the truth. Growing up, I was closer to our grandparents than Melissa and Carson were. My parents worked long hours running a small business, so I spent most weekends and summers at my grandparents' house. They helped raise me, taught me to fish and garden, paid for my college when my parents couldn't afford it. Melissa and Carson lived 2 states away and only visited on major holidays. Our grandparents were well off, not wealthy but comfortable. They owned a paid-off home worth about $600,000 and had retirement savings around $400,000. They'd always said everything would be split equally between their 3 grandchildren when they passed. Fair was fair, even though I'd spent way more time with them. 3 years ago, my grandmother's expensive pearl necklace went missing. It was a family heirloom worth about $15,000, passed down through generations. My grandmother was devastated when she couldn't find it. She'd worn it to a family dinner, and then it was just gone from her jewelry box. Melissa suggested maybe someone had taken it during the dinner. She said it carefully, like she didn't want to accuse anyone, but the implication was clear. The only people at that dinner were family. Carson backed her up, saying, "Valuable items don't just disappear, and maybe we should all check our belongings." 2 weeks later, my grandfather's vintage watch collection started going missing. 3 watches over the course of a month, each worth between $3,000 and $8,000. My grandfather had been collecting them for 40 years. He was heartbroken and confused about where they could have gone.
Melissa and Carson started making comments about how I was the only grandchild who had a key to the house and came by regularly. They never directly accused me, just planted seeds, asked if I was having financial problems, mentioned they'd heard I had credit card debt, wondered aloud if someone desperate might do something they'd normally never do. I did have student loan debt, about $40,000, but nothing unusual for someone my age. I'd never stolen anything in my life, and the accusations hurt. My grandparents seemed troubled but didn't say anything directly to me. I could feel their trust eroding even though they tried to hide it. Then Carson claimed he saw me leaving my grandparents' house late one night when I wasn't supposed to be there. Said he'd stopped by to drop something off and saw my car pulling away around 11 p.m.
My grandparents asked me about it and I said I hadn't been there, but Carson was insistent about what he'd seen. The final piece was when my grandmother found her pearl necklace in my car. She'd asked to borrow my car because hers was in the shop, and when she was looking for her sunglasses in my glove compartment, she found her missing necklace wrapped in a cloth. She called my grandfather immediately, and they both confronted me. I had no explanation. The necklace wasn't there last time I'd cleaned my car. I had no idea how it got there. My grandparents looked at me like I was a stranger. The watches never turned up, but finding the necklace in my car seemed to confirm I'd taken everything. Melissa and Carson acted sympathetic, said maybe I had a gambling problem or drug addiction that made me desperate. They suggested our grandparents get me help instead of involving police. My grandparents didn't press charges, but they did something worse. They removed me from their will entirely. I found out through a family member who'd witnessed the will signing. My grandparents had cut me out completely, leaving everything to be split between Melissa and Carson. When I tried to talk to them about it, they said they couldn't trust me anymore, and that maybe someday we could rebuild our relationship. But the will was final. I was devastated. I'd lost my grandparents' trust, my inheritance, and my place in the family. Melissa and Carson had successfully positioned themselves as the only reliable grandchildren, while framing me as a thief. I had no proof it was a setup, just my word against the evidence. For 2 years, I barely spoke to my grandparents. They'd occasionally reach out, but conversations were strained and painful. I threw myself into work as a graphic designer and tried to move on from the betrayal. Melissa and Carson became the favored grandchildren, visiting regularly and posting photos of their time together on social media. Then, Carson's ex-girlfriend reached out to me through Facebook. Her name was Jen, and she said she had information about what really happened with the thefts. She wanted to meet in person because what she had to tell me could change everything. We met at a coffee shop and Jen dropped a bomb. She'd been dating Carson during the time of the thefts and had broken up with him 6 months ago. During their breakup argument, Carson had gotten drunk and confessed to framing me. He'd bragged about how easy it was to steal the items himself and plant the necklace in my car when I'd left it unlocked at a family gathering. Jen had stayed quiet because Carson had threatened her, said he'd spread lies about her if she told anyone. But after their breakup became final and she'd moved on, she felt guilty about me losing my grandparents' trust. She'd saved text messages where Carson discussed the plan with Melissa, talking about how they'd get a bigger inheritance if I was out of the picture. I took everything to a lawyer. The text messages were damning. Carson and Melissa had discussed stealing the items, planting evidence, and manipulating our grandparents' perception of me. They'd split the proceeds from selling the watches to a private collector. The whole thing had been calculated to cut me out of the will. My lawyer said we had grounds for a civil case against Melissa and Carson for fraud, defamation, and theft. We could also report the theft to police since there was now evidence of who actually stole the items. But my main goal was to show my grandparents the truth. I asked to meet with my grandparents and brought my lawyer and all the evidence. The text messages between Carson and Melissa, the testimony from Jen, the receipt from the collector who'd bought the stolen watches. My grandparents were in shock as they read through everything. My grandfather started crying. He said they'd been wrong about me, and that Carson and Melissa had betrayed the whole family. My grandmother held my hand and apologized for not believing me, for cutting me out of their lives based on manufactured evidence. We filed a police report with all the evidence. Detectives investigated and found the collector who'd purchased the watches from Carson. He still had them and provided records of the transaction. The pearl necklace had been planted in my car using a key Carson had secretly copied during a visit. Carson and Melissa were arrested for theft and fraud. Their lawyer tried to make a deal, but my grandparents refused any plea agreement that didn't include felony convictions. They wanted Carson and Melissa prosecuted to the fullest extent for what they'd done to our family. The trial lasted a week. Jen testified about Carson's confession and the text messages. The collector testified about purchasing stolen goods from Carson. Security footage from my grandparents' community showed Carson and Melissa entering during times when items went missing. The evidence was overwhelming. Both were convicted on multiple counts. Carson got 2 years in prison plus restitution. Melissa got 18 months plus restitution. They were ordered to pay back the value of everything stolen, plus damages to me for defamation and emotional distress. The total came to about $75,000 each. My grandparents immediately updated their will, restoring me to equal status with an additional amount to compensate for the years of pain I'd endured. They wrote Carson and Melissa out completely, stating in the will exactly why they were being disinherited. Carson and Melissa's parents, my aunt and uncle, blamed me for their children going to prison, said I should have accepted their apology and worked it out privately instead of pressing charges. They stopped speaking to my family and created a rift that extended to other relatives. Carson got out of prison 4 months ago. Melissa was released 2 months ago. Both are on probation and working minimum wage jobs to pay their restitution. They've tried reaching out through intermediaries asking if we could settle the debt for a lower amount, claiming they'll never be able to pay the full $75,000 each. My grandparents are now in their early 80s and their health is declining. They've made it clear they want me to be the executor of their estate when they pass, specifically to ensure Carson and Melissa don't get anything. But some extended family members think I should forgive and reduce the debt since we're family. Melissa sent me a letter last week saying she's trying to turn her life around, but the debt is crushing her. She asked if I'd consider accepting $10,000 total to settle everything and let her move forward. Carson hasn't reached out directly, but I heard through family that he's in therapy and supposedly taking accountability. My grandparents are leaving the decision to me about whether to reduce or forgive the debt. They're in their final years and want family peace before they go. But they also don't want Carson and Melissa rewarded for what they did. The extended family pressure is intense, with some relatives saying forgiveness is the right path. I haven't responded to Melissa's letter yet. The $75,000 each they owe represents what they tried to steal from me through their scheme. But I also know that amount will follow them for decades and prevent them from ever building stable lives. My dad's new wife convinced him I was after his money, then drained his accounts. This is about my father's wife, Gabrielle, 41, and how she managed to steal everything my dad had while making me look like the greedy one. I'm 25, my dad is 63, and this nightmare has been unfolding for the past 3 years. Dad met Gabrielle 4 years after my mom died. I was 20, away at college, and happy he'd found someone. He seemed lonely after Mom passed, and Gabrielle was attentive, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about him. They dated for 8 months before getting married in a small ceremony. I supported the relationship completely at first. Things changed slowly. Gabrielle started making comments about how much time Dad spent helping me financially. I was in my last year of college and Dad was covering my tuition and living expenses like he'd always planned. Gabrielle said I was too old to be dependent on my father, that I should be working full-time instead of focusing on school. Dad started questioning the expenses he was covering for me. Asked why my rent was so high, why I needed money for textbooks, whether I really needed a car. These were all things he'd agreed to pay for before Gabrielle came along. I tried to explain these were normal college expenses, but Gabrielle was in his ear constantly about me taking advantage. 6 months after they got married, Gabrielle convinced Dad to make her a joint owner on all his accounts. She said it would make managing household expenses easier and that married couples should share everything. Dad had about $400,000 in savings from selling the house he shared with my mom, plus a healthy retirement account and investment portfolio. I graduated college and got a job as a marketing coordinator, making $45,000 a year. Not great money, but enough to support myself. Dad said he was proud of me for becoming independent. Gabrielle made comments at family dinners about how I'd finally stopped being a financial burden. A year after I graduated, Dad's brother died and left him $150,000. Dad told me he was putting it in a trust for me, that he wanted to make sure I'd have something when he was gone, since Gabrielle would inherit most of his estate as his wife. He said the trust would be untouchable, just for me. 2 months later, Dad called saying there was no money for the trust anymore. Said he'd had unexpected medical expenses and had to use the inheritance to cover bills. I was confused because Dad had excellent insurance and had seemed healthy. He got defensive when I asked questions, said Gabrielle was right about me only caring about his money. That's when I realized Gabrielle was isolating him. She'd convinced him to stop seeing his friends from before they got married. She monitored his phone calls and emails. She was always present when I visited, inserting herself into every conversation. Dad started canceling our regular lunch dates, saying Gabrielle needed him home. I tried talking to Dad about my concerns, told him Gabrielle seemed controlling and that I was worried about his well-being. He got angry, said I was jealous of his happiness and couldn't stand that he'd moved on from my mom. Gabrielle had apparently been telling him I resented her for replacing my mother and wanted to break up their marriage. Dad stopped taking my calls. When I showed up at his house unannounced, Gabrielle answered and said Dad didn't want to see me. She said he was tired of my manipulation and needed space from my toxic behavior. I could hear Dad in the background, but he didn't come to the door. I contacted Dad's financial advisor, someone he'd worked with for 20 years. The advisor couldn't give me specific information, but said he was concerned about recent account activity and suggested I might want to consult an attorney. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I hired a lawyer, and we filed for a wellness check through Adult Protective Services. I explained the isolation, the sudden financial changes, and my concerns about financial exploitation. A caseworker went to their home and interviewed Dad with Gabrielle present. Dad said he was fine, that his ungrateful daughter was harassing him, and that he wanted no further contact with me. The caseworker said there was no evidence of abuse or exploitation and closed the case. Gabrielle sent me a legal cease and desist letter saying I was slandering her and harassing their family. The letter demanded I stop contacting them or face a restraining order. 8 months went by with no contact. Then I got a call from a hospital saying Dad had been admitted with a heart attack. I rushed there and found Gabrielle in the waiting room. She said Dad had specifically requested I not be notified, but the hospital contacted me as next of kin before checking his wishes. Dad survived the heart attack, but needed bypass surgery. During his recovery, while Gabrielle was away from his room, I finally got to talk to him alone. He looked exhausted and older than I'd ever seen him. I asked him what happened to all his money, why he'd cut me out of his life. Dad broke down crying, said he didn't know where his money went, that Gabrielle handled all their finances, and whenever he asked questions, she got angry. He said he knew something was wrong, but was embarrassed to admit he'd been fooled. He'd married her, trusted her, and now everything was gone. I contacted my lawyer immediately. We got a court order to freeze all accounts jointly owned by Dad and Gabrielle, pending investigation of financial abuse. We also filed for emergency conservatorship over Dad's finances while he was hospitalized and unable to manage his affairs. Gabrielle fought back hard. She produced documents showing Dad had given her permission for every transaction. She claimed Dad was having mental health issues and I was taking advantage of his confusion after his heart attack. She said she'd used the money for legitimate household expenses and medical bills. The forensic accountant my lawyer hired found everything. Over 3 years, Gabrielle had systematically drained Dad's accounts. The $400,000 in savings was gone. The retirement account had been liquidated with massive tax penalties. The investment portfolio had been sold off. The $150,000 from Dad's brother never went to medical expenses. It went to Gabrielle's personal accounts and cash withdrawals. Total amount stolen was approximately $680,000. Gabrielle had been transferring money to offshore accounts, making cash withdrawals, buying cashier's checks made out to herself, and using joint credit cards for personal expenses. She'd spent about $200,000 on jewelry, designer clothes, and luxury vacations she took alone, while Dad thought she was visiting her sick mother. The evidence was overwhelming. We filed criminal charges for elder financial abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. The DA took the case seriously given the amount stolen and Dad's age and health condition. Gabrielle was arrested and released on bail. Dad filed for divorce while the criminal case moved forward. He was devastated, humiliated, and financially ruined. He'd worked his whole life, saved carefully, and a woman he'd known for less than 4 years had destroyed everything. He apologized to me constantly for believing Gabrielle's lies about me. Gabrielle's defense was that the money was community property from their marriage, and she had every right to spend it. Her lawyer argued that everything she did was technically legal since she was a joint account holder. The DA argued that the deception and the offshore accounts showed intent to defraud. The case went to trial 6 months ago. Gabrielle was convicted of elder financial abuse and fraud. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $680,000 plus penalties. The offshore accounts were seized and assets liquidated, covering about $380,000. The rest was gone, spent on things that couldn't be recovered. Dad got back about half of what he lost. He's 63, had to take early retirement, and is living on Social Security and the recovered funds. Instead of a comfortable retirement, he's budgeting carefully and will probably need to work part-time within a few years. The stress triggered another minor heart attack 2 months ago. Gabrielle is in prison now and will serve at least 3 years before parole eligibility. Dad's divorce was finalized while she was awaiting sentencing. He lives alone in a small apartment, still processing how thoroughly he was manipulated and used. I've moved back to my hometown to be closer to Dad and help him manage his recovery and finances. We've rebuilt our relationship, but he carries so much guilt about believing Gabrielle's lies and cutting me out of his life. Some days are harder than others for him. Last week, Dad got a letter from Gabrielle's mother asking him to consider writing a letter supporting Gabrielle's early release when she becomes eligible for parole. The mother said Gabrielle has learned her lesson and that keeping her in prison longer won't help anyone. She suggested Dad had been financially irresponsible anyway and bore some responsibility for what happened. Dad asked me what I thought he should do about the letter, whether he should write something supporting her release or ignore it completely. He said part of him feels sorry for Gabrielle despite everything, that prison seems harsh for financial crimes. I haven't told him what I think yet. The letter from Gabrielle's mother is sitting on his kitchen table. Her parole hearing is still 2 years away, but apparently the family wants to start building support now. Dad is waiting for my opinion on how to respond. My ex-stepfather hid my mom's life insurance to fund his new family. Something that happened with my ex-stepfather Greg, 49, has left me dealing with consequences that are still unfolding 3 years later. I'm 26, and what this man did to me after my mother died is something I never saw coming from someone I'd trusted for 15 years. Greg married my mom when I was 9. My biological father wasn't in the picture, so Greg became the only dad I knew. He was good to us, worked hard as a sales manager, provided for our family. When my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer at 38, Greg seemed supportive and dedicated to helping her fight it. Mom fought cancer for 3 years before passing away when I was 21. I was finishing college at the time, completely wrecked by losing her. Greg seemed equally devastated. We grieved together, and he told me repeatedly that we were still family, that he'd always consider me his daughter even though I wasn't biologically his. A few months after Mom died, Greg sat me down to discuss her affairs. He said Mom had a small life insurance policy through her work, about $50,000, which had been used to pay off remaining medical bills and funeral costs. He showed me some paperwork and said there was maybe $8,000 left that he was holding for me to use when I graduated. I trusted him completely and didn't question anything. I graduated college the following year, and Greg gave me the $8,000 as promised. Said he wished it could be more, but Mom's medical bills had been extensive. I was grateful for anything, and used the money to move across the country for my first real job as a marketing coordinator. Greg and I stayed in touch regularly. Phone calls on holidays, occasional visits, the normal relationship between a parent and adult child. About a year after I moved, Greg mentioned he was dating someone. Her name was Paula. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and things were getting serious. I was happy he'd found someone after Mom. Greg and Paula got married quickly, within 8 months of dating. I couldn't make it back for the wedding due to work commitments, but I sent a gift and my congratulations. Greg seemed happy in the photos, and I was genuinely glad he wasn't alone anymore. Then, last year, I got a call from my mom's sister, my Aunt Rachel. She'd been going through old documents and found something strange. Mom had taken out a private life insurance policy that Aunt Rachel had co-signed as a witness. The policy was for $250,000, with me listed as the sole beneficiary. Aunt Rachel asked if I'd received that money, because the policy should have paid out after Mom died. I told her Greg had said there was only $50,000 from a work policy, and most went to bills. Aunt Rachel said that didn't sound right, because Mom had specifically taken out the $250,000 policy to ensure I'd be financially secure. She gave me the policy number and the insurance company's information. I contacted the insurance company, pretending to check on the status of the policy. They confirmed it had paid out $250,000 3 years earlier to the designated beneficiary. When I said I was the beneficiary, they corrected me. The beneficiary on file was Gregory Mitchell, my stepfather. The policy had been changed 2 months before my mother died. I felt sick. Mom had told Aunt Rachel I was the beneficiary, but somehow Greg had gotten himself listed instead. He'd collected $250,000 and told me there was only $50,000, most of which supposedly went to bills. He'd given me $8,000 and kept the rest. I called Greg demanding an explanation. He got defensive immediately, said the money had been used for legitimate expenses I didn't know about. When I pressed for details, he claimed Mom had changed the policy herself because she wanted him to manage the money responsibly, instead of giving it all to me at once. Said she'd told him to give me portions over time. I didn't believe him. If that was true, why lie about the amount? Why tell me it was only $50,000 when it was $250,000? Greg got angry when I kept questioning him, said I was being ungrateful after he'd raised me and supported me through college. He hung up on me. I hired a lawyer and we investigated. The policy change had been made online, using Mom's account credentials 2 months before she died. Mom had been heavily medicated and barely conscious during that time. The IP address for the change traced to Greg's workplace computer. He'd logged into her account and changed the beneficiary while she was dying. We also found that Greg and Paula had bought a house shortly after collecting the insurance money. A $380,000 house with a $130,000 down payment. Greg had told family he'd saved up for years, but the timeline matched perfectly with when he received Mom's life insurance. He'd used my inheritance as a down payment on a house for his new family. There were other expenses too. New cars for him and Paula, furniture, vacations, tuition for Paula's kids' private school. Greg had spent almost the entire $250,000 within 2 years, while giving me only $8,000 and claiming the rest went to bills. My lawyer said we had a strong case for fraud. Greg had illegally accessed Mom's account, changed the beneficiary without authorization, and then lied about the amount to avoid giving me my rightful inheritance. The fact that he'd done this while Mom was dying and unable to defend herself made it even worse. We filed both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. Greg hired a lawyer who claimed Mom had verbally told Greg to change the beneficiary, that she wanted him to have control of the money. They had no evidence of this, and Mom's oncologist testified she'd been too heavily medicated in those final weeks to make complex financial decisions. The criminal case moved slowly, but the evidence was clear. Greg had committed identity theft and fraud by accessing Mom's insurance account. The prosecutor took it seriously because of the elder abuse aspect, even though Mom was only 41 when she died. Greg was convicted of fraud and identity theft 8 months ago. He got a suspended sentence with 3 years probation and was ordered to pay me the full $250,000 plus interest and legal fees. The total judgment came to $285,000. Greg didn't have that money anymore. He'd spent it on the house, cars, and his new family's lifestyle. His wages were immediately garnished, and liens were placed on the house he'd bought with my money. The court gave him the option to sell the house to pay the judgment or face foreclosure. Paula filed for divorce within 2 weeks of the conviction. She claimed she hadn't known the down payment money was stolen from Greg's stepdaughter. She wanted to protect her assets and her kids from Greg's legal problems. The divorce meant the house had to be sold as part of the settlement. Greg lost everything. The house sold, and after paying off the mortgage, there was about $170,000 in equity. That went toward my judgment, but still left him owing me another $115,000. His car was repossessed, his credit destroyed, and Paula got primary custody of her kids, with Greg only getting supervised visitation until his legal issues were resolved. The extended family split over the situation. Some thought Greg deserved everything that happened for stealing from me. Others thought I went too far prosecuting him, that I'd destroyed his life over money when he'd raised me for years. They said I should have worked out a payment plan privately instead of sending him to court. Greg's parents, my former grandparents who'd been part of my life since I was 9, stopped speaking to me entirely. They said I was vindictive and cruel for ruining their son's second chance at happiness. They blamed me for Paula leaving and said I'd taken away Greg's new family out of jealousy. I've collected about $170,000 so far from the house sale. Greg's wages are garnished at the maximum rate, giving me about $600 per month. At that rate, he'll be paying me for the next 15 years to settle the remaining debt. He's living in a small apartment, working the same sales job, and seeing his stepkids every other weekend under supervision. Aunt Rachel thinks I did the right thing. She said Mom would be furious if she knew Greg had stolen my inheritance and used it to fund his new life with Paula. But other family members have suggested I got enough money from the house sale and should forgive the remaining debt. Greg sent me an email last week, first contact since the trial. He apologized for what he did, said he'd made terrible decisions while grieving and trying to build a new life. He acknowledged stealing my inheritance and lying about it. He asked if I'd consider settling the remaining $115,000 debt for whatever amount I thought was fair. He said the garnishment is making it impossible for him to live, that he's barely surviving, and will never be able to rebuild his life with this debt hanging over him. He mentioned he's in therapy and taking accountability, trying to understand why he made such destructive choices. Part of me feels satisfied that he's facing consequences for what he did. But another part remembers the man who came to my school plays, taught me to drive, and was there for 15 years as my father figure. The betrayal hurts more because of how close we'd been. I'm supposed to respond to his email by the end of the month. My lawyer says whatever I decide is up to me, that the judgment is legally mine to enforce or forgive. I still don't know what to do. My father-in-law sabotaged my job to force us back to his town. The manipulation from my wife's father, Donald, 61, has caused damage to my career and marriage that I'm still trying to untangle. I'm 34, married to Donald's daughter Rachel for 8 years, and what he orchestrated to control our lives crossed every boundary imaginable. Rachel and I met in college and got married young. We both grew up in a small town in Ohio where Donald owned a successful car dealership. After graduation, we moved to Chicago, where I'd gotten a job as a civil engineer with a major firm. Rachel found work as a graphic designer. We were building our careers and lives together in the city. Donald never approved of us leaving. He'd built his business, expecting Rachel to eventually take it over, or at least stay nearby with her family. He made comments constantly about how we were wasting our time in the city, how we'd never build real wealth working for other people, how we should come home and join the family business. We visited Ohio for holidays, but made it clear Chicago was our home. I was doing well at my firm, working on major infrastructure projects and moving up steadily. Rachel loved city life and had no interest in moving back to a small town. Donald seemed to accept it eventually, though he still mentioned the dealership whenever we visited. 5 years into our marriage, I started having problems at work. Projects I was leading encountered unexpected issues. Clients complained about things I supposedly said or did, though I had no memory of those conversations. My supervisor started questioning my judgment and reliability. Then came the big one. I was project lead on a $12 million bridge renovation. Halfway through, we discovered major errors in the structural calculations that would cost hundreds of thousands to fix. The errors were traced back to documents I'd supposedly signed off on. I insisted I'd never seen those documents, but my digital signature was on them. My firm put me on administrative leave while they investigated. My reputation was destroyed internally. Colleagues who'd respected me suddenly avoided me. I went from rising star to liability in a matter of weeks. The stress was affecting my marriage as Rachel watched everything we'd built in Chicago falling apart. During this nightmare, Donald kept calling with the same suggestion. Come back to Ohio, take a position at his dealership, leave the uncertainty of corporate life behind. He acted sympathetic about my work troubles while pushing hard for us to relocate. Rachel was starting to consider it given how bad things had gotten. I hired a lawyer when my firm suggested I resign rather than be terminated. The lawyer recommended a forensic IT investigation to examine the documents I'd supposedly signed. That investigation revealed something shocking. The documents bearing my digital signature had been created and submitted from an IP address that didn't match my work computer or any device I owned. The metadata showed they'd been created after hours, when I wasn't even in the office. Someone had forged my digital signature and submitted fraudulent documents designed to make me look incompetent. Further investigation traced the IP address to a computer consultant firm that Donald's dealership had used for years. The consultant, a guy named Pete, who'd known Donald for decades, admitted under questioning that Donald had paid him $15,000 to hack into my work email system and create the forged documents. Donald had systematically sabotaged my career to force us back to Ohio. The client complaints, the project errors, the fraudulent documents, all of it traced back to a coordinated campaign orchestrated by my father-in-law. He'd hired people to impersonate me in phone calls with clients, hack my work systems to plant fake documents, and spread rumors about my competence. Rachel was in complete shock when I showed her the evidence. She called her father immediately and he admitted everything. Said he'd done it for the family, that we were wasting our potential in Chicago and he was helping us see the right path. He claimed once we were back in Ohio running the dealership together, we'd thank him for pushing us in the right direction. Rachel told him we'd never speak to him again after what he'd done. Donald acted hurt and confused, said we were overreacting and that family takes care of each other. He offered to call my firm and explain it was a misunderstanding, like that would somehow fix everything. I went to the police with all the evidence. Donald was charged with computer fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Pete the consultant was charged as an accomplice. My firm was horrified when they learned what had happened and immediately reinstated me with full back pay. But the damage was done professionally. My name had been associated with major project failures and ethical questions. Even though I was cleared of any wrongdoing, the stigma remained. Colleagues never looked at me quite the same way. I'd lost credibility that couldn't be fully restored. Donald hired an expensive lawyer who tried to characterize his actions as a family dispute rather than criminal fraud. The prosecutor wasn't buying it. Donald had paid someone to hack into corporate computer systems and create fraudulent documents that cost his son-in-law's company hundreds of thousands of dollars. This went way beyond family drama into serious white-collar crime. The case went to trial after Donald refused a plea deal that included prison time. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital forensics showed exactly how Pete had accessed my work systems. Financial records showed Donald's payment to Pete. Pete himself testified against Donald in exchange for a reduced sentence. Donald was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Pete got 18 months. Donald was also ordered to pay $240,000 in restitution to my firm for the damages caused by the sabotage, plus $75,000 to me for lost wages and emotional distress. Rachel's mother, Linda, divorced Donald while he was awaiting sentencing. She'd had no idea what he was doing and was mortified by his actions. She told Rachel she couldn't stay married to someone who'd commit crimes to manipulate their daughter's life. Donald went to prison 8 months ago. The dealership had to be sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Linda got half the proceeds from the sale and the divorce and moved to Florida to live near her sister. The family business Donald had been so desperate to keep in the family was gone because of his own choices. Rachel struggles with immense guilt, even though none of this was her fault. She blames herself for not seeing what her father was capable of, for even considering moving back to Ohio when that's exactly what he wanted. She's been in therapy dealing with the betrayal and the loss of the father she thought she knew. My career recovered somewhat, but never fully. I left the firm a year after everything came out and started my own consulting practice. It's going okay, but I'm not where I would have been if Donald hadn't sabotaged my trajectory. The opportunities I lost during that period when my reputation was damaged can't be reclaimed. Donald's been trying to contact Rachel from prison. He's sent letters that she won't read, made phone calls she won't accept. Her mother, Linda, says Donald claims he did everything out of love, that he just wanted his daughter nearby and made bad decisions trying to make that happen. Rachel's younger brother still talks to Donald and has been pressuring Rachel to visit him in prison. Says their dad is suffering and needs family support, that holding a grudge won't help anyone. The brother thinks we should forgive Donald and move forward, especially since the dealership sale means Donald lost everything too. But Donald didn't just make a mistake. He spent months orchestrating a campaign to destroy my career and force us to abandon the life we'd built. He hired hackers, forged documents, and caused massive professional damage because he couldn't accept that his daughter had her own life separate from his plans. Rachel and I are in couples therapy trying to process everything that happened. The therapist says Rachel needs to make her own decision about contact with her father without pressure from me or her brother. But Rachel knows my feelings, that I can never forgive what Donald did and never want to see him again. Donald gets out of prison in a little over 2 years. He'll be 64, unemployed, with a felony record and no business or family waiting for him. His ex-wife won't talk to him, his daughter won't see him, and his son-in-law despises him. He destroyed everything trying to control his daughter's life. Rachel's brother called yesterday saying Donald's parole hearing is coming up in 18 months. He wants Rachel to write a letter supporting early release, saying it would help Donald rebuild his life sooner and maybe give them a chance to repair their relationship. Rachel asked me what I thought she should do. I told her it was her decision and I'd support whatever she chose. But she knows I think Donald should serve every day of his sentence for what he did to us. She has 2 weeks to decide whether to write the letter for his parole hearing. My half-brother secretly recorded me to blackmail me into giving up my inheritance. The whole mess with my half-brother Tyler, 27, started destroying my life about 18 months ago, and I'm just now starting to expose what he did to our entire family. I'm 32, and Tyler has always resented that we share a father but had completely different upbringing experiences. Our dad had Tyler with his first wife when he was young and broke. That marriage fell apart when Tyler was 5, and Dad paid child support but wasn't very involved. By the time Dad met my mom 10 years later, he'd built a successful contracting business and was financially stable. I grew up comfortable with both parents present, while Tyler grew up struggling with a single mom and an absent father. Dad tried to reconnect with Tyler when Tyler turned 18, but too much damage had been done. Tyler was angry about the childhood he'd missed and the resources he'd gone without. He'd see photos of my birthday parties and family vacations and compare them to his own childhood memories. I understood his resentment, even though it wasn't my fault. 2 years ago, Dad got sick with ALS. He deteriorated quickly and knew he didn't have much time. He wanted to make things right with Tyler before he died, so he reached out and they started rebuilding their relationship. Tyler visited regularly, helped with medical appointments, seemed to be genuinely making an effort. I was happy they were finally connecting. Dad updated his will during this time. He left the contracting business to me since I'd been working there for 8 years and knew how to run it. The business was worth about $2 million. He left Tyler $500,000 in cash and investments, a substantial amount that would set him up well. Dad thought this was fair since I'd invested years in the business, while Tyler had his own career path as an electrician. Tyler seemed okay with this arrangement when Dad explained it to us. He appreciated being included at all, and that $500,000 was life-changing money for him. Dad died 4 months later, and the funeral was emotional, but brought our families together. Tyler and I actually bonded during that time, or so I thought. 3 weeks after the funeral, Tyler called and asked to meet for coffee. He seemed nervous, kept fidgeting with his cup. Finally, he pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was me talking to my husband about Dad's will, saying things like how I'd earned the business and Tyler was lucky to get anything considering he'd been absent most of Dad's life. The recording was taken out of context from a private conversation in my own home. I'd been venting frustration about family drama, but Tyler had edited it to make me sound cruel and greedy. He had other recordings too, snippets of conversations where I sounded entitled or dismissive of Tyler's childhood struggles. Tyler said he'd been recording conversations for months using a hidden device he'd placed in my house during a family dinner. He'd accumulated hours of material and edited together the worst moments. He said if I didn't agree to split the business proceeds with him 50-50, he'd release the recordings to our entire family and make sure everyone knew what I really thought of him. I was in shock. My own brother had bugged my house and was now blackmailing me. I told him to go ahead and release the recordings, that I wasn't giving him half of what Dad left me. He said I'd regret that decision and left. 2 days later, Tyler sent a carefully edited audio compilation to our extended family group chat. In the edited version, I sounded like a spoiled brat who'd never appreciated Dad and thought Tyler was beneath us. Quotes were spliced together out of context to create a narrative that I was greedy and had manipulated Dad into leaving me the business. The family reaction was immediate and brutal. Dad's siblings called me entitled and heartless. Cousins I'd known my whole life said they were disgusted by my true feelings. My aunt said I should be ashamed of myself for how I'd treated Tyler. Nobody asked for my side of the story or questioned the authenticity of the recordings. Tyler played the victim perfectly, said he'd stumbled upon these recordings accidentally, that he'd been heartbroken to hear what I really thought of him, but that family deserved to know the truth. He didn't mention the blackmail attempt or the fact that he'd illegally recorded me in my own home. I tried to explain the recordings were edited and taken out of context, but nobody wanted to hear it. I tried to tell them Tyler had planted recording devices in my house and was blackmailing me, but that made me sound paranoid and defensive. Tyler's narrative had already taken hold. The business started suffering because of the family drama. Dad's old clients heard rumors about problems with the inheritance and started questioning whether they should continue working with us. 2 long-term employees quit because they didn't want to be involved in family conflict. I was trying to grieve my father while watching everything he built fall apart. My lawyer said what Tyler did was illegal. Recording someone in their home without consent violated wiretapping laws in our state. The blackmail was extortion, a felony. We could press charges and sue for damages, but prosecuting my own brother would make the family situation even worse. I hired a forensic audio expert to analyze the recordings. He confirmed they'd been heavily edited, with sentences spliced together from different conversations and context removed to change meanings. He could prove the manipulation in court, but the damage to my reputation was already done. Tyler started a social media campaign about being the forgotten child who finally got recognition from his father, only to have his greedy half-sister try to exclude him again. He never explicitly named me, but everyone who followed him knew who he was talking about. He gained sympathy and followers while I looked like the villain. I decided to go nuclear. I filed criminal charges against Tyler for illegal wiretapping and extortion. I filed a civil lawsuit for defamation and invasion of privacy. I had my lawyer send cease and desist letters to every family member who'd shared Tyler's edited recordings, threatening legal action if they continued spreading the defamatory material. Tyler didn't expect me to actually prosecute. He thought I'd be too worried about family opinion to take legal action. When the police showed up to question him about the recordings, he panicked and admitted everything. Admitted planting the device, admitted the editing, admitted the blackmail attempt. The criminal case moved quickly because Tyler's confession was on record. He was charged with felony wiretapping and extortion. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal where Tyler would avoid prison time in exchange for a guilty plea and restitution. My lawyer said I could accept the deal or push for trial. I pushed for trial. Tyler had tried to destroy my reputation and steal my inheritance using illegal recordings. He'd turned my family against me and damaged my father's business. I wanted every detail exposed in open court. The trial lasted 3 days. The forensic audio expert testified about the editing and manipulation. The technical investigator testified about finding Tyler's recording device in my home. Tyler's blackmail text messages were entered into evidence. My husband testified about the fear and violation we felt knowing we'd been recorded in our private moments. Tyler was convicted on all counts. He got 18 months in prison for the wiretapping and extortion charges. He was ordered to pay $75,000 in restitution for my legal fees and damages to the business. He was also ordered to publicly retract his statements and apologize for the defamation. The civil case settled while Tyler was awaiting sentencing. His homeowner's insurance covered some of the damages, and he agreed to pay an additional $100,000 over time for emotional distress and reputational harm. He had to sign a statement admitting he'd illegally recorded me, edited the recordings to create false narratives, and attempted blackmail. Family members who'd believed Tyler's story had to face the fact that they'd been manipulated. Some apologized to me. Others stayed silent out of embarrassment. A few still thought I'd been too harsh prosecuting Tyler, that family should handle problems privately even when crimes are committed. Tyler went to prison 6 months ago. He'll serve at least a year before parole eligibility. His career as an electrician is essentially over with a felony conviction. His wife filed for divorce while he was awaiting sentencing, taking their 2 kids and moving back to her hometown. Dad's business is recovering slowly. I've rebuilt relationships with most employees and clients. The family reputation took a hit, but people understand now that Tyler was the problem, not me. I'm running the company the way Dad would have wanted. Last week I got a letter from Tyler's lawyer asking if I'd write a statement supporting parole. Tyler has apparently been a model prisoner and wants early release. His lawyer says Tyler deeply regrets his actions and has used prison time for reflection and growth. Tyler's ex-wife also reached out. She said the kids miss their dad and that keeping him in prison longer won't undo what he did. She asked if I could find it in my heart to support his early release for the sake of his children. I haven't responded to either request. Tyler's parole hearing is in 6 months. The parole board will consider victim impact statements when making their decision. My statement could significantly influence whether he gets released early or serves his full sentence. I keep thinking about what Dad would want me to do, but I honestly don't know. My mother-in-law convinced my husband I was cheating to get control of our kids. I need to tell this story because what my former mother-in-law Diane did to me almost cost me my children, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath. I'm 31, divorced now, and this whole nightmare started 3 years ago when I was happily married to my ex-husband Trevor, 33. Trevor and I met in college, married at 25, had 2 kids by the time I was 28. Our daughter Emma is 5 now, our son Lucas is 3. We had a good marriage, or I thought we did. Normal problems, nothing major. We both worked, shared responsibilities, supported each other's careers. Diane never liked me. From the moment Trevor introduced us, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. I came from a working-class family, Didn't have a college degree when we first met. Worked as a dental hygienist. Diane came from money and thought Trevor should have married someone from a similar background. She tolerated me but never warmed up. When I got pregnant with Emma, things got worse. Diane had opinions about everything. How I should eat, what prenatal vitamins to take, what parenting style to use. She'd show up at our house unannounced, rearrange things in the nursery, criticize my choices. Trevor usually backed me up, but wanted to keep the peace with his mom. 2 years ago, I went back to school part-time for my bachelor's degree. I had classes 2 evenings a week and Saturday mornings. Trevor watched the kids during my classes. I was working toward a better career, trying to improve our family's future. Trevor supported it completely. One of my classmates was a guy named Jordan. We were in a study group together, worked on projects as partners a few times. Completely platonic. He had a girlfriend. I was married with kids. We'd sometimes grab coffee after class with other classmates to work on assignments. Normal school stuff. Diane somehow found out I was studying with a male classmate. She started asking Trevor questions about it, planting seeds of doubt. Was I really at school all those hours? Did Trevor know this Jordan person? Why was I suddenly so focused on my appearance, wearing makeup to evening classes? I wasn't doing anything wrong, just trying to look presentable for school. But Diane twisted everything. She hired a private investigator to follow me without telling anyone. The investigator took photos of me having coffee with Jordan and other study group members. Photos of us leaving the library together. Completely innocent stuff that Diane presented to Trevor as evidence of an affair. Trevor confronted me one night after the kids were in bed. He had photos spread out on our dining table. Me laughing at something Jordan said. Me walking to my car with Jordan after class. Me hugging Jordan goodbye, which had happened once when he told me his grandmother died. Trevor said his mom showed him everything and that he needed the truth. I tried to explain it was nothing, that we were classmates and study partners. Trevor wanted to believe me, but Diane had been so convincing. She'd created timelines, pointed out nights I came home 15 minutes later than expected, mentioned how I'd started dressing nicer. She'd built an entire narrative of deception. Trevor asked me to stop attending classes with Jordan, to switch study groups. I refused because I wasn't doing anything wrong and wasn't going to let Diane control my education. That refusal made me look guilty in Trevor's eyes. We started fighting constantly. Diane would call Trevor daily, feeding him more suspicions, more twisted interpretations of my normal behavior. The worst part was, Diane started keeping the kids more often. She'd offer to babysit when I had classes, saying it would give Trevor a break. I didn't see the strategy at first. She was documenting every time she watched them, building a case that she was more present in their lives than I was. 4 months into this nightmare, Trevor filed for divorce. Diane had convinced him I was having an affair and that our marriage was over. She'd also convinced him to fight for primary custody of the kids. Her reasoning was that I was too focused on school and my supposed affair to be a good mother. She wanted Trevor to have the kids most of the time, with her helping raise them since Trevor worked full-time. I got a lawyer immediately. We demanded Trevor get his own investigator to follow me, to prove I wasn't cheating. Trevor refused, said he already had enough evidence from his mother's investigator. The photos were taken out of context, but looked damning to someone who wanted to believe the worst. The custody battle was brutal. Diane testified against me in court, said she'd witnessed me being neglectful, said the kids were often dirty or hungry when she picked them up. Complete lies. She said I prioritized school over my children, that I was absent and distracted. Trevor's lawyer painted me as an unfaithful wife and inadequate mother. My lawyer fought back hard. We subpoenaed Diane's investigator and got his full report, which actually showed nothing inappropriate. We got statements from Jordan and his girlfriend confirming our relationship was purely academic. We got testimony from my professors about my character. We proved Diane had been manipulating the evidence. The judge saw through it eventually. He granted joint custody, 50-50 split, and called out Diane's interference in his ruling. He specifically noted that her allegations appeared motivated by personal animosity rather than genuine concern for the children. But the damage was done. My marriage was over. My reputation was destroyed, and I'd spent $40,000 on legal fees. The divorce finalized a year ago. Trevor got the house because his income was higher and he could afford the mortgage. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. Emma and Lucas switch between us every week. It's not what I wanted for them, but I make it work. 6 months after the divorce, Trevor started dating someone new. Her name is Michelle. She's 26, works in marketing. Diane hated her immediately. Michelle came from an even more working-class background than me, had visible tattoos, spoke her mind. Everything Diane despised. Trevor brought Michelle around the kids after 3 months of dating. Diane lost it, said Michelle was a bad influence, that Trevor was moving too fast. She started doing to Michelle exactly what she'd done to me, criticizing her appearance, her job, her background. But this time, Trevor saw it happening in real time. Michelle refused to tolerate Diane's behavior. She called Diane out directly, set firm boundaries, didn't let the manipulation slide. Trevor started noticing patterns, started realizing his mother's behavior was the problem, not his partner's. He called me 2 months ago and asked to meet for coffee. Without the kids, just us. I agreed, curious about what he wanted. He apologized for everything, said he'd been blind to his mother's manipulation, that he saw now what she'd done to our marriage. He'd found old emails from Diane where she explicitly discussed strategies to break us up because she thought I wasn't good enough for him. Trevor said he'd cut contact with Diane, that he wouldn't let her see the kids anymore until she got therapy, and apologized to me. He asked if there was any chance we could reconcile, start over, rebuild our family. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him for destroying our marriage over his mother's lies. But another part remembered the man I fell in love with, the father of my children, the partnership we'd had before Diane poisoned everything. I told him I needed time to think. That was 8 weeks ago. Trevor has kept Diane away from the kids since then. She's been calling me, leaving voicemails begging to see her grandchildren, saying I'm turning her son against her. She sent flowers, apology cards, even showed up at my apartment once before I threatened to call the police. Emma keeps asking why she doesn't see Grandma Diane anymore. Lucas is too young to really notice. Trevor wants an answer about reconciliation. My lawyer says I should be careful, that Trevor broke my trust once and could do it again. Michelle broke up with Trevor last week, said she couldn't deal with his family drama. He's alone now, just him and the kids on his weeks, dealing with his mother's constant attempts to regain access to his life. I still haven't given him an answer about trying again. My nephew hacked my accounts and drained my retirement to fund his startup. What my nephew Cameron, 24, managed to pull off has essentially destroyed my retirement plans and left me scrambling at an age when I should be winding down. I'm 52, and the fact that my own sister's kid could do this to me is something I'm still trying to process. Cameron is my older sister Beth's son. He grew up interested in computers and technology, went to college for computer science, and was always the tech-savvy member of the family. When anyone had computer problems, we'd call Cameron. When I needed help setting up online banking or understanding new software, Cameron walked me through it. I trusted him completely with anything technology-related. I'm a high school teacher who's been working for 30 years. Never made huge money, but saved consistently and built up a retirement account worth about $680,000. I plan to retire at 55 and finally have time to travel and enjoy life. My retirement was my security after decades of modest living and careful saving. 3 years ago, Cameron started talking about a tech startup idea, some kind of app for education technology that would revolutionize classroom learning. He was passionate about it, had a business plan, and was looking for investors. He asked family members to invest, but I declined. I told him I couldn't risk my retirement money on a startup, even one run by family. Cameron seemed to understand. said he appreciated me being honest and that he'd find other investors. He continued developing his idea while working a regular job as a software developer. He'd update the family about his progress during holidays and seemed to be making headway. Last year, Cameron offered to help me upgrade my computer security. Said he'd noticed I was using old passwords and wanted to make sure my accounts were protected. He came over, spent an afternoon setting up new security systems, two-factor authentication, password managers, the works. I felt safer knowing Cameron had secured everything properly. 6 months ago, I logged into my retirement account and saw the balance was $127,000. I thought there was an error. The account should have been around $680,000. I called the investment company immediately, and they confirmed the balance was correct. Over the past 8 months, there had been multiple large withdrawals totaling $553,000. I didn't authorize any withdrawals. The investment company showed me transaction records with my digital signature approving each transfer. The money had been moved to various accounts, then dispersed. I filed a fraud claim immediately, but the company said the transactions appeared legitimate, approved through proper authentication channels. I hired a forensic accountant and a cybersecurity expert to investigate. They discovered that Cameron had installed keylogging software on my computer when he was supposedly upgrading my security. He'd captured all my passwords, account information, and authentication details. He'd then used that information to access my retirement account and systematically drain it. The money had been transferred through a series of accounts designed to obscure the trail, but the forensic team traced it. Almost all of it went to funding Cameron's startup. He'd used my retirement savings to pay developers, rent office space, purchase equipment, and cover operating costs for his education tech company. When I confronted Cameron with the evidence, he initially denied everything, said I must have been hacked by someone else, and he'd help me figure out who. When I showed him the forensic evidence linking the theft directly to his startup accounts, he changed his story. Cameron claimed he'd borrowed the money and planned to pay it back once his startup succeeded. Said he'd tried to get venture capital but couldn't secure funding, and my retirement account was just sitting there not being used. He actually said I should think of it as an investment in his future, that when his company went public, I'd get back way more than I'd lost. His logic was completely deranged. He'd stolen over $500,000 from me and thought I should be excited about the potential returns from his unauthorized investment of my money. He showed me his startup's financials like that would make everything okay, pointing to modest growth and claiming the company would be worth millions eventually. I went to the police with all the evidence. Cameron was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including computer fraud, identity theft, and grand theft. His startup immediately collapsed once word got out that the founder had stolen the operating capital from his own aunt's retirement account. Beth, Cameron's mother and my sister, was devastated but initially tried to defend him. Said he'd made a terrible mistake but had genuinely believed he'd pay the money back. She asked me to consider not prosecuting, to work out a repayment plan privately. She offered to contribute $50,000 if I dropped the charges. I refused. Cameron had systematically stolen my retirement over months, covering his tracks and lying about it. This wasn't a mistake or momentary lapse in judgment. He'd planned it, executed it, and only showed remorse after getting caught. Even then, his remorse was about getting in trouble, not about destroying my financial security. The criminal case moved forward. Cameron's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal where he'd avoid prison in exchange for full restitution. My lawyer pointed out Cameron had already spent most of the money and had no way to pay it back. The startup had failed, and its remaining assets were worth maybe $80,000 total. The prosecutor wasn't willing to let Cameron avoid prison. The amount stolen was massive, the violation of trust was egregious, and the crime required technical sophistication that made it especially serious. Cameron had used his family relationship and technical skills to commit a calculated theft from someone who'd trusted him completely. Cameron went to trial rather than accept a plea deal that included prison time. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital forensics showed exactly how he'd installed the keylogger, captured my credentials, and accessed my accounts. Financial records showed my money flowing directly into his startup. His own emails discussed using the funds to keep his company operational. Cameron was convicted on all counts last month. He got 6 years in prison for the fraud and theft charges. He was ordered to pay full restitution of $553,000 plus legal fees and damages, bringing the total judgment to $625,000. The court also ordered liquidation of any remaining startup assets to go toward restitution. The startup assets sold for $73,000. Cameron has no other money or income. He'll be in prison for at least 4 years before parole eligibility, and when he gets out, he'll have a felony record making it nearly impossible to work in tech. The restitution will follow him for life, but there's no realistic way he'll ever pay back even half of what he owes me. My retirement is destroyed. I'm 52 with $200,000 in my retirement account instead of the $680,000 I should have. I can't retire at 55 as planned. I'll probably have to work until I'm 67 or 70 to build back enough savings to live on. 3 decades of careful saving were erased by someone I trusted completely. Beth hasn't spoken to me since Cameron's sentencing. She blames me for sending her son to prison, says I valued money over family. Other relatives are divided, with some supporting my decision to prosecute and others thinking I should have handled it privately. Family gatherings are impossible now with this rift between Beth and me. My ex-husband, who I divorced 20 years ago, has been surprisingly supportive. He heard about what happened and reached out. We've been talking regularly, and he's offered to help me understand my financial options going forward. It's strange getting support from my ex while my own sister won't speak to me. I'm seeing a therapist to deal with the betrayal and anxiety about my financial future. The therapist says I did the right thing prosecuting Cameron, that protecting myself was necessary. But I still struggle with guilt about putting my nephew in prison, even though I know rationally he belonged there for what he did. Cameron wrote me a letter from prison that arrived yesterday. He apologized for what he did and said he understands why I prosecuted him. He said prison has given him time to reflect on how badly he violated my trust. He asked if there was any way I'd consider supporting his parole application when the time comes, saying early release would let him start working and paying restitution sooner. The letter felt manipulative, even while apologizing. He's framing early parole as being in my interest because he could start repayment sooner. But realistically, he'll never repay the full amount, no matter when he gets out. It feels like another attempt to use our family relationship to get what he wants. Beth sent me a message through a cousin asking if I'd read Cameron's letter and consider supporting his parole. She said Cameron is genuinely remorseful and that keeping him in prison the full 6 years won't help anyone. She implied that supporting his early release might be a step toward repairing our relationship. I haven't responded to Cameron's letter or Beth's message. I'm still working full-time with no retirement in sight, watching my former students become colleagues because I can't afford to leave. Every day I'm reminded of what Cameron stole and how my future changed because of his choices. My financial advisor has created a new retirement plan that involves working until 68 and living more frugally than I'd anticipated. It's not the retirement I spent 30 years planning for, but it's something. The advisor said I should consider the $73,000 recovered from the startup sale as probably the only restitution I'll ever see. Cameron's parole hearing will be in about 3.5 years. The parole board will consider victim impact statements when deciding whether to grant early release. My statement could influence whether he serves the full 6 years or gets out after 4. I don't know what to write in that statement yet, or if I'll support or oppose his parole. Part of me wants him to serve every day of his sentence for what he did to my life. But another part knows that keeping him in prison longer won't give me my retirement back or fix the damage that's already done. The blank page where I'm supposed to write the victim impact statement is still sitting on my desk. My siblings locked me out of our family business, then blamed me when it failed. What happened between me and my siblings over our family business has destroyed any relationship we had left. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to fix it. I'm 35 and my brother Jason, 38, and sister Monica, 33, decided 2 years ago that I wasn't needed in the restaurant our parents built. Our parents started a small Italian restaurant 30 years ago. Nothing fancy, just good food and family atmosphere. They built it from nothing into a neighborhood staple that made decent money. All three of us grew up working there, bussing tables as kids, cooking as teenagers, managing shifts in our 20s. When our parents retired 5 years ago, they divided ownership equally between the three of us. Each got a third of the business, and we were supposed to run it together. For 3 years, it worked fine. Jason handled the kitchen, Monica managed front of house and marketing. I dealt with finances and suppliers. We had our disagreements, but generally functioned as a team. Then Jason's wife Amanda started getting involved. She had restaurant management experience and began offering suggestions. Some were good, like updating the menu and modernizing the decor. Others were expensive, like the complete kitchen renovation she pushed for. Amanda started coming to ownership meetings, and suddenly I was the only one without a spouse weighing in on business decisions. 2 years ago, Amanda convinced Jason and Monica that I was holding the restaurant back. She said I was too conservative with spending, too resistant to change, and that my financial management was preventing growth. She had charts and projections showing how much more profitable we could be if we invested in expansion. Jason and Monica started having meetings without me. They'd make decisions and tell me after the fact. When I objected, Amanda would say I was being territorial and unwilling to collaborate. She positioned herself as the voice of reason while painting me as the problem. The breaking point came when Jason and Monica voted to take out a $300,000 loan for renovations and expansion without my approval. As equal partners, major financial decisions needed unanimous agreement, according to our operating agreement. They did it anyway, claiming Amanda's business expertise meant they knew better than me. I threatened to sue them for violating our partnership agreement. Instead of backing down, Jason and Monica offered to buy me out, said they'd pay me fair market value for my third, and I could walk away. The offer was $180,000, which was technically fair based on the restaurant's current value, but way less than it could be worth if the expansion worked. I refused. The restaurant was my parents' legacy, and I wasn't giving up my share. Jason and Monica said I was being stubborn and selfish, preventing the business from reaching its potential. Amanda called me a dinosaur who couldn't adapt to modern restaurant management. Jason and Monica froze me out completely. They stopped including me in any decisions, changed the locks without giving me new keys, and had their lawyer send a letter saying I was no longer welcome on the premises during business hours. I could only access financial records by appointment with their accountant present. They used the $300,000 loan to completely renovate the restaurant, new kitchen equipment, expanded dining room, updated interior design. They hired additional staff and changed the menu to more upscale dishes with higher prices. Amanda essentially became an unofficial fourth partner, making decisions without any ownership stake. I watched from the outside as they transformed our parents' cozy neighborhood restaurant into something unrecognizable. The new menu alienated longtime customers who came for affordable comfort food. The higher prices drove away families. The fancy atmosphere felt wrong for our working-class neighborhood. Business started declining within 6 months. The loan payments were $4,500 monthly, and revenue wasn't covering the increased expenses. Jason and Monica kept insisting they just needed more time for the new concept to catch on. Amanda blamed the neighborhood for not appreciating elevated dining. I had no say in any of it. I'd receive quarterly financial statements showing mounting losses, but Jason and Monica ignored my warnings. Amanda convinced them I was sabotaging them with negativity and that they needed to stay committed to the vision. After a year, the restaurant was failing badly. They'd burned through the loan money, maxed out business credit cards, and were behind on supplier payments. Revenue was down 40% from before the renovation because they'd lost their core customer base without attracting enough new upscale diners. Jason and Monica called me for the first time in months. They wanted to discuss options for saving the restaurant. When I showed up, Amanda was there too, running the meeting like she was an owner. They wanted me to personally loan the business $100,000 to keep it afloat while they refined the concept. I said no. They'd excluded me from all decisions, locked me out, and now wanted my money to fix their mistakes. Jason said I was letting our parents' legacy die out of spite. Monica cried and said I was being cruel. Amanda called me a vindictive child who valued ego over family. I told them the only way I'd help was if they bought me out for $350,000, double the original offer. They said that was insane. I said it was my price for cleaning up their mess, or they could figure it out themselves. The restaurant closed 6 months later. They couldn't make the loan payments, suppliers stopped delivering, and the landlord started eviction proceedings for unpaid rent. Jason and Monica had to file for bankruptcy to discharge the business debts. Our parents' 30-year legacy was gone. The bankruptcy destroyed Jason and Monica financially. The business debts exceeded what they could discharge, and they ended up personally liable for about $150,000 each. Jason had to sell his house and move his family into a rental. Monica's credit was ruined, and she lost her car. Amanda divorced Jason within a year. Apparently, her commitment to the family business didn't extend to bankruptcy and poverty. I walked away relatively unscathed. As a frozen-out partner who hadn't approved the loan or subsequent decisions, my lawyer argued I shouldn't be personally liable for debts I'd opposed. The courts agreed, and I was released from most of the obligations. I lost my $180,000 in equity from the failed business, but didn't take on additional debt like my siblings did. Our parents were devastated when they found out the restaurant had closed. They'd retired to Florida and didn't know how bad things had gotten until it was over. When they heard the full story about how Jason and Monica had excluded me and made disastrous decisions against my advice, they were furious with them. Our parents stopped speaking to Jason and Monica for a year, wouldn't take their calls, sent back their letters, refused to see them when they tried to visit Florida. They blamed them for destroying the family legacy through arrogance and stupidity. The family fracture went beyond just sibling conflict to include the older generation. Jason and Monica eventually blamed me for everything. They said if I'd been more supportive of the expansion, if I'd loaned them the money they needed, if I hadn't been so negative about their vision, the restaurant would have succeeded. They convinced themselves I'd sabotaged them by refusing to help when they needed me. The extended family took sides. Some thought I should have helped save the restaurant despite being excluded. Others thought Jason and Monica got what they deserved for freezing me out. Holiday gatherings became impossible with half the family refusing to be in the same room as the other half. 3 months ago, Jason reached out saying he wanted to reconcile. He admitted they'd made mistakes listening to Amanda, that they should have valued my financial expertise, and that excluding me was wrong. He said Monica felt the same way but was too proud to reach out. He asked if we could meet and try to repair our relationship. I agreed to meet for coffee. Jason looked rough, clearly stressed and aged by the financial disaster. He apologized for everything, said losing the restaurant taught him hard lessons about partnership and respect. He said he missed having a brother and wanted to rebuild what we'd lost. Then, he mentioned that our parents were getting older and would eventually need care. He said it would be easier to handle their future needs if the three of us were united again. He suggested we could work together on planning for their retirement and medical care. That's when I realized the reconciliation attempt wasn't really about repairing our relationship. Jason and Monica had burned through their finances in the bankruptcy and couldn't afford to help with our parents' future care. They needed me to take on that financial responsibility and were trying to rebuild the relationship to make it happen. I asked Jason directly if money was part of why he wanted to reconcile. He got defensive and said it wasn't about money, but then mentioned that I was the only one of us in a position to help our parents financially if they needed it. He said families support each other, and implied I had an obligation to help since I'd come out of the restaurant failure in better shape. I ended the coffee meeting and haven't responded to Jason's follow-up messages. Monica sent a text yesterday saying our parents' air conditioning broke and they need $4,000 to replace it, asking if I could help since she and Jason can't afford it. Our parents haven't asked me for anything directly. I don't know if I should help our parents, reconnect with my siblings, or keep my distance from all of it. My sister sabotaged my wedding and stole my fiancé while I planned her dream life. So I'm 26, and my younger sister Victoria, 23, just destroyed my entire life while I was busy trying to help her succeed. This whole situation is so messed up that I'm still processing it, but I need to get it out because keeping it inside is eating me alive. Victoria and I were always close growing up. I'm the older sister who helped her with homework, drove her to parties, covered for her when she snuck out. When she got accepted to law school 2 years ago, she couldn't afford it. Our parents are gone, died when I was 19, and I'd been working as a paralegal supporting both of us. I took out a $40,000 personal loan so she could go to her dream school without drowning in student debt. She cried and promised she'd pay me back once she became a lawyer. I got engaged to Marcus last year. We'd been together for 4 years, and I thought he was it. He's a graphic designer, makes decent money, treats me well, or so I thought. We started planning the wedding for this past June. Nothing fancy, about 100 people, budget of $25,000 that I'd been saving for years. Victoria offered to help with wedding planning since she had more free time between classes. She said it would be fun, bonding time for us sisters. She helped me pick the venue, the caterer, the photographer, everything. I was grateful because planning a wedding while working full-time was exhausting. 3 months before the wedding, I noticed Marcus was being distant, coming home late, always on his phone, making excuses about work projects. I asked him if something was wrong, and he said he was just stressed about a big client. I believed him because I'm an idiot. 2 months before the wedding, Victoria suddenly told me she was taking a semester off from law school, said she was burned out and needed a break. I was concerned, but supportive. I told her she could stay with Marcus and me as long as she needed. She moved into our guest room within a week. The wedding was supposed to be on June 15th. On June 1st, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. Found Marcus and Victoria in our bed. They weren't even trying to hide it. Clothes everywhere, completely obvious what was happening. I lost it. Started screaming, throwing things. Victoria had the nerve to cry and say it just happened, that they'd fallen in love and couldn't help themselves. Marcus said he was sorry, but that he'd developed real feelings for Victoria and couldn't marry me while having doubts. They'd been sleeping together for 5 months, since January, the entire time I was planning our wedding. The wedding got canceled, obviously. I had to contact everyone, return gifts, lose deposits on everything. The venue kept $8,000. The caterer kept $3,000. The photographer kept $1,500. I lost over $12,000 in non-refundable deposits, not to mention the emotional destruction. Victoria moved out immediately, but Marcus stayed because his name was on the lease. Worst 3 weeks of my life living with him until I could find a new place. He kept trying to explain that what he and Victoria had was real, that he never meant to hurt me. I told him to shut up and stayed with a friend most nights. Then I found out Victoria had been systematically sabotaging things the whole time. Remember how she helped me plan everything? She'd told the florist I wanted cheap flowers when I'd picked expensive ones. She'd told the DJ I wanted top 40 hits when I'd requested a specific playlist. She'd told the baker I wanted a simple cake when I'd ordered a custom design. She'd been downgrading everything I chose while pocketing the difference. The vendors started calling me after the cancellation, asking about refunds, and that's when I discovered she'd stolen about $6,000 from my wedding budget by changing my orders. I confronted her over the phone. She admitted it, said she needed the money for expenses since she wasn't in school. Didn't even sound sorry about it. Said I'd get over Marcus eventually, and that they were actually better suited for each other anyway. She was living with him now, in his new apartment, playing house with my ex-fiancé. I contacted a lawyer about the loan I'd taken out for her law school. Since she'd dropped out and stolen from me, I wanted to know my options. The lawyer said I could sue her for the loan amount since it was documented and she'd breached our agreement by dropping out without repaying me. I filed the lawsuit. Victoria called me screaming that I was trying to ruin her life over a breakup. Said suing your own sister was psychotic and that I needed therapy. Marcus called me too, said I was being vindictive and that Victoria was struggling enough without a lawsuit. I hung up on both of them. My lawyer also helped me file a police report for the theft of the wedding money. The vendors had documentation of Victoria changing my orders and taking the refunds. It was fraud, plain and simple. The detective assigned to the case said it was a solid case because there was a clear paper trail. Dad's life insurance money that I'd been managing for both of us was still in an account with my name on it. Victoria's portion was $30,000, sitting there waiting until she finished school. I'd been the responsible one managing it. I withdrew her portion and put it in a separate account that she couldn't access until the lawsuit and criminal case were resolved. If she wanted her inheritance, she'd have to make things right. Victoria and Marcus got engaged 2 months after my canceled wedding. She posted it all over social media with photos and captions about finding true love when you least expect it. People who didn't know the full story were congratulating them. I had mutual friends asking me if I was okay with it, if we'd all made peace. I hadn't told most people the details because I was humiliated. The lawsuit moved forward. Victoria couldn't afford a lawyer, so she represented herself, which went exactly as poorly as you'd expect. The judge ruled in my favor for the full $40,000 plus interest and court costs. Victoria was ordered to start making payments immediately. She didn't have the money, obviously, so the judgment just sits there, accumulating more interest. The criminal case for the wedding fraud took longer. Victoria eventually accepted a plea deal for misdemeanor theft and fraud. She got 2 years probation, community service, and was ordered to pay restitution of $6,000. She has a criminal record now, which is going to make getting into law school again pretty much impossible, even if she wanted to go back. Marcus and Victoria's relationship fell apart about 6 months after they got engaged. Turns out when your relationship is built on betrayal and stolen money, it doesn't last. He kicked her out, and she had to move back in with our aunt, who lives 3 hours away. The aunt called me asking if I could help Victoria get back on her feet. I said no. Victoria hasn't paid a cent of the lawsuit judgment or the restitution. Her wages get garnished when she manages to keep a job, but she keeps quitting or getting fired. Last I heard, she was working at a retail store making minimum wage. She'll be paying me back for the rest of her life at this rate. The inheritance money is still sitting in that account. Victoria has tried multiple times to access it, but can't without my approval. She's sent me emails, text messages, even handwritten letters begging for it. Says she needs it to get her life together, to go back to school, to move forward. I haven't responded to a single message. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from the aunt saying Victoria was having a mental health crisis and needed help paying for therapy. The aunt asked if I could release the inheritance money for medical expenses. I said I'd think about it. I haven't decided yet. Part of me thinks about the sister who used to braid my hair and watch movies with me on weekends. But then I think about finding her in my bed with my fiancé, about the wedding that never happened, about the $12,000 I lost in deposits while she was stealing from me. The money sits there earning interest. Victoria keeps asking. I keep not answering. My stepmother faked documents to steal my college fund and blamed me for being ungrateful. I'm 24 now, but when I was 18, my stepmother Patricia and my dad pulled something that completely derailed my life, and I'm only now getting revenge. This is going to sound insane, but everything I'm about to tell you is documented and real. My mom died when I was 11. Dad remarried Patricia when I was 14. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, twins named Blake and Sophia, who were 12 at the time. From day one, Patricia made it clear her kids came first. I was the outsider in my own house. Before Mom died, she'd set up a college fund for me. Her parents contributed to it, and when she passed, they added her life insurance money to it. By the time I was 18, there was $175,000 in that account. It was supposed to be untouchable until I turned 18, managed by a trustee at the bank. My maternal grandmother was listed as the backup guardian of the funds if anything happened to the primary trustee. I got accepted to a good university out of state. When I contacted the bank to access my college fund in July, before starting school in August, they told me the account had been closed and the funds distributed in March. I thought there was a mistake. There wasn't. Patricia had somehow gotten herself named as my legal guardian for financial purposes when she married my dad. She'd forged documents claiming my grandmother had relinquished her backup guardianship and petitioned the court to become the primary trustee. The bank had verified the paperwork and released the funds to her. All $175,000 was gone. When I confronted Dad and Patricia, they said the money had been used for family expenses over the years. Medical bills, house repairs, the twins' private school tuition. Patricia said I should be grateful they'd raised me, and that the money went to good use for the whole family. Dad backed her up completely, said I was being selfish, and that family shares resources. I had no money for college. I'd turned down scholarship offers from cheaper schools because I thought I had my fund. I ended up at community college, working 2 jobs, living with a friend's family who took pity on me. My grandmother was in a nursing home by then with dementia and couldn't help. I was completely on my own. I tried to report it to the police, but Patricia had all these legal documents showing she'd been appointed trustee. The detective said it looked like a civil matter, not criminal, and I'd need to sue. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I was 18, broke, and had just lost everything my mother left me. I spent the next 6 years grinding. Community college for 2 years, then transferred to a state school on partial scholarship while working full-time. Graduated with my bachelor's at 23, got hired at a financial services firm. I was good at my job, got promoted quickly, and started making decent money for the first time in my life. During those 6 years, I didn't speak to Dad or Patricia. They'd occasionally try to reach out, but I ignored them. The twins added me on social media, and I saw they'd both gone to expensive private colleges. Blake posted photos from a study abroad program in Italy. Sophia got a brand new car for her 21st birthday, all funded by money that was supposed to be mine. Last year, I finally had enough saved to hire a lawyer. I brought him every document I had about the college fund, Mom's will, the trust documents, everything. He spent 3 months investigating and came back with something I never expected. The guardianship documents Patricia had filed were completely fraudulent. She'd forged my grandmother's signature on the relinquishment papers. She'd also forged a judge's signature on the court order appointing her as trustee. The lawyer found the real judge's records, and those proceedings never happened. Patricia had created fake court documents, and the bank had somehow not caught it. This wasn't a civil matter anymore. This was fraud, forgery, and theft. My lawyer contacted the DA's office with everything. They opened a criminal investigation immediately. When the detectives contacted the bank, they discovered Patricia had done this with help from someone who worked there, an old friend of hers who'd processed the paperwork without proper verification. That person had since left the bank, but investigators tracked her down. The case built quickly. Patricia and her friend had left a clear trail of forged documents, falsified court records, and fraudulent financial transfers. The DA offered me updates throughout the process. They were going after Patricia for multiple felonies. Dad called me when Patricia got arrested. He was crying, said I was destroying our family over money, that Patricia had made a mistake but didn't deserve prison. I asked him if he knew the documents were forged. He got quiet, then admitted Patricia had told him she'd worked it out legally and he hadn't asked questions. He'd known something was off and didn't care because it benefited his new family. Patricia's lawyer tried to make a deal. She'd plead guilty to lesser charges and pay restitution if I agreed to support a lighter sentence. My lawyer asked what I wanted to do. I said no deal. Take it to trial. Patricia had stolen my future and let me struggle for 6 years without losing a single night's sleep. She could face the full consequences. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia and her bank friend were both convicted. Patricia got 4 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and theft. Her friend got 2 years. They were jointly ordered to pay $175,000 in restitution, plus interest, which brought it to about $210,000. Patricia went to prison 8 months ago. Dad divorced her while she was awaiting sentencing, trying to protect their assets from the restitution order. Didn't work. The court went after their joint accounts, their house, everything. Dad had to sell the house and move into an apartment. The twins had to drop out of their expensive schools and transfer to cheaper ones. Blake called me last month, said I'd ruined their lives, that their mom made a mistake but I'd gone too far. Their family was destroyed, their house was gone, and they'd lost their futures because of me. I told Blake their college educations were paid for with my stolen money and hung up. The restitution payments come in slowly. Patricia obviously can't pay from prison, and her assets are mostly gone. The bank ended up settling with me separately for $100,000 because of their employees' role in the fraud. It's not the full amount, but it's something. I'm using it to go back to school for my master's degree, something I should have been able to do years ago. Dad keeps trying to reconcile. He says he's sorry, that he should have questioned Patricia, that he failed me as a father. He wants to rebuild our relationship before it's too late. He's 58 now and his health isn't great. He says he doesn't have much time left to make things right. I've agreed to meet him for coffee next week. I don't know what I'm going to say. Part of me wants to forgive him because he's my dad, and life is short. But another part of me remembers being 18 and finding out my college fund was gone. Remembers working 2 jobs while Blake posted photos from Italy. Remembers 6 years of struggling while they lived comfortably on my mother's money. Patricia gets out in 3.5 years. The twins have made it clear they'll never speak to me again. Dad is waiting for me to decide if I can forgive him. The coffee meeting is in 4 days, and I still don't know if I'll show up. My twin brother assumed my identity to ruin my career while building his own. The situation with my identical twin brother Ethan, also 29 obviously, has completely upended my life in ways I'm still trying to repair. What he did to me over the past 2 years was so calculated and destructive that I'm amazed we share the same DNA. Ethan and I were close growing up despite being competitive. We both went into finance, me as a financial analyst and him as an investment advisor. We worked for different firms in different cities, had separate lives, but stayed in regular contact. Being twins, we looked identical. Same height, same build, same voice. People who didn't know us well couldn't tell us apart. 2 years ago, Ethan's firm started investigating him for ethics violations. A client had complained that Ethan had made unauthorized trades in their account and misrepresented investment risks. Ethan told me it was a misunderstanding, that the client was confused about what they'd agreed to. He seemed stressed but confident it would get resolved. Around the same time, I started noticing weird things at work. Colleagues mentioned seeing me at places I'd never been. My boss asked about a lunch meeting I supposedly attended but had no memory of. A client mentioned a conversation we'd supposedly had that never happened. I figured people were confusing me with someone else or misremembering. Then I got called into HR about a sexual harassment complaint. A female coworker said I'd made inappropriate comments to her at a bar after a company event. I hadn't attended that event because I was out of town at a conference. When HR showed me security footage from the bar, I saw someone who looked exactly like me talking to the coworker. But it wasn't me. It was Ethan. He'd been coming to my city, pretending to be me and attending my company's events. He'd learned enough about my job and coworkers from our conversations to convincingly pass as me in casual settings. The harassment complaint was just the start of what he'd been doing. I immediately contacted Ethan, demanding an explanation. He denied everything at first, said I was paranoid and stressed. When I mentioned the security footage, he got quiet. Then he admitted he'd been struggling with his ethics investigation and thought if he could damage my reputation, people might confuse our identities enough that his own problems would be overlooked. His logic was insane. He thought if we were both having professional problems, investigators might mix us up and dismiss his actual violations as confusion between twins. He'd been systematically impersonating me to create scandals that would muddy the waters around his own investigation. The harassment complaint was just one incident. Ethan had also attended client meetings as me and made inappropriate pitches for high-risk investments. He'd shown up drunk to a networking event pretending to be me and insulted several industry professionals. He'd sent emails from a fake account similar to mine with unprofessional content. My firm launched an investigation once I explained about my twin brother. They reviewed security footage from multiple events and confirmed that sometimes it was me and sometimes it was someone else who looked identical. The coworker who'd filed the harassment complaint was shocked when she learned I had a twin who'd been impersonating me. But the damage was done. Even with proof that Ethan had been impersonating me, my reputation was destroyed. Clients questioned whether they could trust me. Colleagues weren't sure which version of me they'd interacted with. My firm put me on administrative leave while they sorted everything out, which looked terrible to the industry. Meanwhile, Ethan's firm concluded their investigation and fired him for the ethics violations. He lost his investment advisor license and was fined by regulatory authorities. His career in finance was over, and he'd tried to take mine down with him so he wouldn't be alone in professional failure. I hired a lawyer, and we gathered evidence of everything Ethan had done. Security footage from multiple locations showing him in my city when I had alibis elsewhere. Credit card records showing him making purchases near my workplace. Cell phone tower data placing him in locations he shouldn't have been. Testimony from people who'd interacted with him thinking he was me. We filed criminal charges for identity theft, fraud, and defamation. We also filed a civil lawsuit for damages to my career and reputation. The evidence was overwhelming that Ethan had been systematically impersonating me for months to sabotage my professional life. Ethan's defense was that he'd been having a mental health crisis after losing his license. His lawyer argued he needed treatment, not prosecution. He claimed he wasn't thinking clearly and didn't understand the full impact of what he was doing. He'd never intended to destroy my career, just create enough confusion to deflect from his own problems. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Ethan had made calculated decisions over months, planned his impersonations carefully, and deliberately damaged my reputation. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained campaign of identity fraud. Ethan was convicted on multiple counts. He got 2 years in prison, plus restitution for the financial damages I could prove. He was ordered to pay $200,000 for lost wages, legal fees, and damage to my professional reputation. He also had to issue public statements clarifying that he'd impersonated me and that I wasn't responsible for actions attributed to me during the time he was pretending to be me. My firm eventually brought me back from administrative leave, but things were never the same. Some clients refused to work with me anymore, couldn't get past the confusion about which twin they dealt with. Some colleagues treated me differently, like I might suddenly turn out to be Ethan in disguise. I was passed over for a promotion I'd been in line for because leadership didn't want the controversy. I ended up leaving that firm after a year and starting over at a smaller company in a different city. I took a pay cut and a step down in seniority just to escape the shadow of what Ethan had done. My career trajectory was completely derailed. Ethan served 18 months before being released on parole 2 months ago. He's living with our parents, working at a hardware store, and has no prospect of returning to finance. His license is permanently revoked, and his criminal record makes it impossible to work in any financial capacity. Our parents have been trying to mediate reconciliation. They're devastated that their twin sons are completely estranged and want us to work things out. They've acknowledged what Ethan did was terrible, but think 3 years of estrangement is enough punishment on top of his legal consequences. Ethan wrote me a letter from prison that our mom recently gave me. He apologized extensively for what he did, said he'd been spiraling after losing his license, and made horrible decisions he deeply regrets. He said he understands I might never forgive him, but hopes someday we can at least be civil for our parents' sake. The restitution payments come slowly. Ethan makes $16 per hour at the hardware store, and his wages are garnished. I get about $300 per month, meaning it'll take him 50 years to pay back the $200,000 judgment. I'm not holding my breath for full repayment. My career is slowly recovering. I've been at the new firm for a year, gotten good reviews, and am rebuilding my professional reputation. But I'm still dealing with anxiety about people confusing me with Ethan. I've started introducing myself with my full name and immediately mentioning I have a twin who isn't in the industry, just to head off any confusion.
Our parents are hosting Thanksgiving next month and want both of us to attend. They're asking me to give Ethan a chance, to sit down together and try to move forward. They say family is important and that Ethan has paid his debt to society. But I keep thinking about all the client meetings I lost, the promotion I didn't get, the firm I had to leave. Ethan didn't just commit fraud against random victims, he specifically chose to destroy his identical twin's career to cover for his own failures. That's a level of betrayal that goes beyond typical sibling rivalry. A colleague at my new firm recently asked if I had any siblings. I said no. It was easier than explaining I have an identical twin who's a convicted felon who impersonated me. That's what my relationship with Ethan has become, something I actively hide from people who might judge me by association. Ethan called me last week for the first time since his release, said he understood if I didn't want to talk, but asked if I'd at least respond so he'd know I got his letter. Said he's in therapy and trying to make amends to everyone he hurt. Said he'd stay away from Thanksgiving if my attending depended on him not being there. I haven't responded to the call. The Thanksgiving invitation from our parents is still open. They're waiting to hear if I'll come, and I know they're hoping I'll say yes, and that Ethan and I can start rebuilding some kind of relationship. Part of me wants to maintain the boundary I've created, but another part remembers growing up as twins, having someone who understood me completely, before everything got destroyed by his choices. I don't know if that relationship can ever be recovered, or if I even want to try. I need to give our parents an answer about Thanksgiving by this weekend. My uncle forged my signature to sell my inherited property and keep the money. This story involves my uncle Richard, 52, and how he committed fraud to steal property that my grandfather left me when I died. I'm 27 now, and what happened 2 years ago still makes me furious every time I think about it. My grandfather owned a small commercial building in a decent part of town. He'd bought it in the 1980s for almost nothing, and by the time he died, it was worth about $850,000. He left it to me in his will because I was the only grandkid who'd spent real time with him. I'd visit every weekend during high school, helped him with maintenance on the building, learned about property management from him. He always said I'd appreciate it more than anyone else in the family. Grandpa died when I was 25. The will was clear. The building went to me, some cash went to my mom and her siblings, and everything else got divided up fairly. Richard, my mom's brother, got $50,000 cash and some stocks. He seemed fine with it at the funeral. I was living in another state when Grandpa died, working as a project manager at a construction firm. The plan was to keep the building and hire a property manager since it had good tenants and generated decent rental income. Richard offered to help manage things until I could move back or set up proper management. He'd lived near the property his whole life and knew the tenants. I said yes. For 6 months, Richard sent me monthly reports about the building. Rent collected, maintenance done, everything seemed normal. The money went into an account I'd set up, and Richard would tell me when expenses needed to be paid. I trusted him completely because he was family and had always been reliable.
Then I got a call from one of the tenants asking about the new owners. I had no idea what they meant. They said the building had been sold, and the new owners were planning renovations that would require the tenants to move out temporarily. I told them there was a mistake, that I owned the building and hadn't sold anything. I immediately called Richard. He didn't answer. I called 5 more times. Nothing. I called my mom, and she said Richard had mentioned something about the building being sold, but she'd assumed I knew about it. I flew back home the next day. The building had been sold 3 weeks earlier for $825,000. Richard had forged my signature on all the documents. He'd created fake IDs in my name, worked with a crooked notary who didn't verify anything, and closed the sale without me ever knowing. The money went into an account he controlled. When I finally tracked Richard down, he said he'd done me a favor. The building needed major repairs that would cost hundreds of thousands. The tenants were going to leave anyway, and the market was at its peak. He'd sold it at the right time and saved me from a disaster. He said he was holding the money for me and would transfer it once some tax issues were sorted out. I went straight to the police with every document I had. The detectives took it seriously once they saw the forged signatures and fake identification. Richard had been sloppy, using a notary who was known for sketchy deals and creating obvious forgeries. The bank records showed the $825,000 went into an account Richard had opened using my personal information. Richard hired a lawyer immediately and claimed it was a misunderstanding. He said I'd given him power of attorney to handle the sale and that the signatures were legitimate. He produced a document showing I'd supposedly granted him this authority. That document was also forged, and poorly. My actual signature looked nothing like what was on the power of attorney paperwork. The buyer of the building was in a nightmare situation too. They'd paid $825,000 for a property that was sold fraudulently. My lawyer said we could void the sale since I never authorized it, but the buyer had acted in good faith, and their money was already gone. This became a complex legal mess involving multiple lawyers and insurance companies. Richard had spent almost $200,000 of the money already. New car, paid off his mortgage, gave money to his kids for college, took expensive vacations. He'd gone on a spending spree thinking he'd gotten away with it. The remaining $625,000 was still in the account, but Richard's lawyer argued that unwinding the sale would harm innocent buyers. My lawyer filed both criminal and civil cases. The criminal case was for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The civil case was to recover my property or the full value plus damages. The title insurance company got involved because they were on the hook for insuring a fraudulent sale. The whole process took 8 months. Richard kept insisting to family members that this was a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, that he'd planned to give me the money all along. My mom believed him at first, said I should work it out privately without involving police. When she saw the evidence of the forgeries, she finally accepted what Richard had done. Richard's kids, my cousins, stopped speaking to me. They said I was destroying their family over money, that their dad made a mistake but I was taking it too far. Their college funds were at risk because Richard had used the stolen money to pay their tuition. They blamed me for their financial problems, instead of blaming their father for committing fraud. The criminal trial happened first. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple forensic document examiners testified the signatures were forged. The notary who'd notarized the fake documents cut a deal and testified against Richard. Bank records showed everything. Richard was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The civil case settled before trial. The title insurance company paid me $850,000, the current market value of the property. The buyer got to keep the building, since they'd purchased it in good faith, and their title was insured. Richard was ordered to pay restitution of $200,000 for what he'd spent, plus another $100,000 in damages and legal fees. Richard went to prison 9 months ago. He'll serve at least 2 years before being eligible for parole. His wife divorced him while he was awaiting sentencing, trying to protect her own assets from the restitution orders. She got the house in the divorce, but Richard's wages will be garnished for the rest of his life to pay back what he owes. My cousins blame me for their parents' divorce and their dad's imprisonment. At family gatherings, they won't speak to me, turn their backs when I walk into a room. My aunt, Richard's ex-wife, is civil but cold. She lost her marriage because of what Richard did, but somehow I'm the villain for prosecuting him. My mom is caught in the middle. She knows Richard committed serious crimes, but he's still her brother, and she hates seeing him in prison. She's asked me multiple times if there's any way to reduce his sentence or help him get early parole. I've said no every time. Richard made calculated decisions to steal from me, and he needs to face the full consequences. The $850,000 I received from the settlement is invested now. I bought a small rental property in a different city, put the rest in index funds. It's not the same as having Grandpa's building, the one he'd worked so hard for and specifically wanted me to have, but it's something. The emotional loss of that connection to my grandfather hurts more than the financial aspect. Richard's parole hearing is in 14 months. His lawyer has already contacted me asking if I'd write a letter supporting early release. Richard has apparently been a model prisoner, taken classes, shown remorse. The lawyer said it would mean a lot to the parole board if the victim supported his release. I haven't responded to the request. Richard's kids have started reaching out too, sending messages about how their dad has changed and how keeping him in prison longer won't help anyone. They say their family needs him home, that they've suffered enough. Part of me knows that keeping Richard in prison won't undo what he did or bring back my grandfather's building. But another part of me thinks about how he spent 6 months lying to me, forged my signature, stole my inheritance, and only showed remorse after getting caught and convicted. The letter request is sitting in my email. The parole hearing gets closer every day. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do. They destroyed my business to fund their lifestyle and expected me to forgive them. My brother Kyle, 35, and my father have been causing me problems for the past year, and what they did to my company still makes my blood boil. I'm 30, and I spent 6 years building a software consulting firm from nothing. Started in my apartment with one client, grew it to 15 employees and consistent 6-figure revenue. I was proud of what I built. Kyle never had much going for him. Dropped out of college twice, bounced between sales jobs, always had some new scheme that would make him rich. Dad always made excuses for him, said Kyle just needed to find his passion. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one who never asked for anything. 2 years ago, Kyle came to me with a business proposal. He wanted to start a marketing agency and needed $50,000 to get it off the ground. Said he had clients lined up, a solid plan, everything ready to go. He just needed capital. I told him no. I'd worked too hard for my money to hand it over for another one of his ideas. He didn't take it well, but I thought he'd moved on. Last year, Kyle started dating someone who worked at my bank. I didn't think much of it at the time. Her name was Morgan. She seemed nice enough at family dinners. I had no idea what was coming. 4 months ago, I noticed money missing from my business account. Small amounts at first. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Then bigger chunks. By the time I caught it, nearly $80,000 was gone. I immediately contacted my bank and filed a police report. The investigation revealed everything. Morgan had accessed my account using her position at the bank and transferred money to an account Kyle controlled. They'd been doing it for 7 months. When confronted, Kyle claimed it was a loan, said I owed him for all the times Dad helped me when I was starting out. Except, Dad never helped me financially. Not once. Kyle said I was being dramatic and that he was going to pay it back once his marketing agency took off. The agency didn't exist. He'd used my money to lease a luxury car, take expensive vacations, and rent a high-end apartment. Morgan lost her job immediately and faced criminal charges. Kyle acted like he was the victim, told family members I was trying to ruin his life over a misunderstanding. Dad called me and asked me to drop the charges against Kyle, said prosecuting my own brother was going too far, that family forgives family. I refused. Dad stopped talking to me after that. The criminal case moved slowly, but my lawyer said we had Kyle dead to right on fraud and embezzlement. Morgan took a plea deal and testified against Kyle, admitting they'd planned the whole thing together. She got probation and restitution orders. Kyle was looking at actual prison time. That's when Dad started his campaign. He called every family member we had, told them I was vindictive and bitter, that I was sending Kyle to prison over money I could easily afford to lose. My aunt stopped inviting me to family events. Cousins unfriended me on social media. My uncle told me I should be ashamed of myself for not protecting my brother. The worst part was, Dad started a GoFundMe to pay for Kyle's legal defense. He wrote this whole story about how Kyle made a mistake and his cruel younger sibling was destroying the family over it. He shared it everywhere, tagged mutual friends and family. People I'd known my whole life were donating and leaving comments about how I should drop the charges. My business started suffering. 2 clients dropped me after seeing Dad's posts, said they didn't want to work with someone involved in family legal drama. I was losing money from the theft and losing income from the fallout. I had to lay off 3 employees. Kyle's lawyer reached out with a settlement offer. If I agreed to drop the criminal charges, Kyle would pay back $20,000 and we'd call it even. $20,000 out of $80,000. My lawyer said I should take it because criminal cases are unpredictable and at least I'd get something. I told him absolutely not. Then I found out about the house. Dad had taken out a second mortgage on his paid-off home to cover Kyle's legal fees. He was risking his retirement, his security, everything, to protect Kyle from consequences. When I confronted him about it, he said, "That's what fathers do for their sons," and implied I wouldn't understand because I only cared about money. Something in me snapped. I'd been trying to be reasonable, to let the legal system handle it, but they were making me the villain. I decided if they wanted to see vindictive, I'd show them vindictive. I hired a forensic accountant to dig through everything. Turns out Kyle had been running other scams too. He'd taken money from Dad over the years under false pretenses, small business loans that never got paid back, credit cards in Dad's name that Kyle maxed out. The accountant found nearly $60,000 in additional debt Kyle had created using Dad's information. I presented everything to Dad. Showed him bank statements, credit reports, everything. Told him Kyle had been stealing from him for years and he'd been too blind to see it. Dad didn't believe me at first, called it fabricated evidence. But I made him call the credit card companies and verify. When he realized it was true, he just sat there, staring at the papers. Kyle's trial date got set. The prosecutor had a strong case, and Kyle's public defender wasn't optimistic. Dad stopped posting on social media about it. The GoFundMe got taken down. Family members started reaching out to me asking what really happened, saying they'd heard different stories. Kyle took a plea deal 2 weeks before trial. He pled guilty to fraud and got 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation and full restitution of the $80,000 he took from me. The judge wasn't sympathetic, said Kyle had violated trust and used his relationship with me to commit crimes. Dad sat in the courtroom and didn't say a word. After sentencing, Dad tried to talk to me outside the courthouse. He said he was sorry for not believing me, that he didn't realize how bad Kyle had gotten. He looked old and tired, and part of me felt bad for him. But then he asked if I could help him pay off the second mortgage, since Kyle obviously couldn't pay him back now. I said no. Told him he made his choice when he took out that loan, when he started that GoFundMe, when he turned the whole family against me. He said I was being cruel, that he was my father and he needed help. I walked away. My business recovered. The clients who left came back after the news coverage showed what actually happened. I hired back the employees I'd laid off and brought on 2 more. The insurance covered some of the stolen money, and the restitution order means I'll eventually get the rest, though I'm not holding my breath. Kyle went to prison 3 months ago. Dad calls me once a week asking if I've reconsidered helping him. He's selling the house now because he can't afford the mortgage payments. He'll have to move into a small apartment, probably lose most of his retirement savings. Family members tell me I should help him because he's my father and he's struggling. But here's what nobody seems to understand. Dad didn't struggle when he was funding Kyle's defense. He didn't struggle when he was telling everyone I was the problem. He only started struggling when the consequences caught up with him. I got a letter from Kyle last week from prison. He apologized, said he understands why I did what I did, asked if we could talk when he gets out. I haven't responded. I don't know if I will. Part of me wonders if Grandma would want me to forgive them, but she's not here to ask, and they made their choices. Dad's house goes up for sale next month.
The absolute nightmare involving my brother's wife, Angela, 36, started 18 months ago and has put me through hell that I'm still fighting to escape from. I'm 33, a single dad to 2 kids, and what Angela did to try to take them from me is beyond anything I thought family was capable of. My wife died 4 years ago from complications during childbirth with our second child. Our daughter Emma is 7 now, and our son Tyler is 4. I've been raising them alone since my wife passed, working as an accountant while managing everything at home. It's been hard, but we've built a good life together, and my kids are happy and healthy. Angela is a nurse practitioner who's been married to my older brother Kevin for 10 years. They've struggled with infertility and have been trying to have kids the entire time they've been married. Multiple rounds of IVF failed, adoption applications didn't work out, and it's been a source of pain for them. I've always been sympathetic to their situation. After my wife died, Angela started offering to help with the kids. She'd volunteer to babysit, take them for weekends, attend their school events when I couldn't. I appreciated the help and thought she was being a supportive sister-in-law. The kids liked spending time with her and Kevin. About 2 years ago, Angela started making comments about my parenting. Small things at first, like suggesting Emma needed more structure or that Tyler should be in more activities. Then bigger things, like questioning whether I was feeding them properly or keeping up with their doctor appointments. I brushed it off as her being overly concerned. Last year, Angela offered to take the kids for a week during summer so I could catch up on work during a busy season. I agreed and dropped them off at her house. When I picked them up a week later, Emma seemed upset, but wouldn't tell me what was wrong. Tyler was fine, too young to really articulate anything unusual. 2 weeks after that visit, I got a call from Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report claiming my kids were being neglected. Allegations included inadequate food, missed medical appointments, unsafe living conditions, and emotional abuse. A caseworker came to my house unannounced to investigate. I was blindsided. My house was clean, my fridge was stocked, my kids were well cared for. I showed the caseworker medical records proving all vaccinations and checkups were current. I provided school records showing good attendance and no behavioral problems. The caseworker seemed confused because nothing matched the allegations in the report. The investigation was closed within 3 weeks with no findings of neglect or abuse. But the caseworker mentioned the reporter had been very detailed and specific, citing medical concerns that required professional knowledge. I immediately suspected Angela. I confronted my brother and Angela about the CPS report. Angela acted shocked and hurt that I'd accuse her. Kevin defended her, said she'd never do something like that. They suggested maybe a teacher or neighbor had been concerned about something innocent and overreacted. I didn't have proof it was Angela, so I dropped it, but stayed wary. 3 months later, another CPS report. This one included allegations that I was using drugs and that the kids had witnessed domestic violence between me and a girlfriend. I wasn't using drugs and didn't have a girlfriend. More specific medical concerns were listed, including claims that Emma had untreated injuries and Tyler showed signs of developmental delays. The second investigation was more intensive. I had to take drug tests, provide character references, and submit to home visits. My kids were interviewed at school by social workers. Again, nothing substantiated the claims. The kids were fine, I was clean,
and there was no evidence of anything alleged in the report. But this time the caseworker told me something alarming. The reports included references to medical records that supposedly documented my neglect. Records from appointments I'd never attended, at clinics I'd never been to. Someone had created fake medical documentation to support the allegations. I hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and CPS cases. We investigated and discovered the medical records submitted with the CPS reports were falsified. They used real clinic letterheads and formatting, but documented appointments that never happened. The falsifications were professional quality, the kind someone with medical experience could create. My lawyer contacted the clinics whose letterheads had been used. None had any record of my kids being patients there. We filed complaints with the state medical board about fraudulent medical records. We also filed a police report for fraud and filing false reports with CPS. The investigation led straight to Angela. Her work computer had been used to access the clinic record systems she had legitimate access to as a nurse practitioner. She downloaded templates and used them to create fake records about my kids. Her personal email had sent the falsified documents to CPS along with the anonymous reports. When confronted by investigators, Angela claimed she'd been genuinely concerned about the kids' welfare. She said she'd seen signs of neglect during their visits and felt obligated to report it. She admitted to embellishing some details in the reports to make sure CPS took her concerns seriously. She denied creating fake medical records, even though the evidence was overwhelming. The real reason came out during the investigation. Angela had been in contact with a family lawyer about gaining custody of my kids. Emails showed she'd been planning to use CPS reports to build a case that I was an unfit parent. Once CPS had enough documented concerns, she planned to petition for custody, claiming she and Kevin could provide a better home with 2 parents instead of 1. She'd been systematically trying to destroy my reputation as a parent so she could take my kids and finally have the family she'd always wanted. She'd used her medical knowledge and access to create convincing false evidence to support her claims. Angela was arrested and charged with filing false reports, fraud, and practicing medicine outside the scope of her license. The state medical board suspended her license pending investigation. She faced up to 3 years in prison and permanent loss of her nursing credentials. Kevin was devastated when he learned what Angela had done. He claimed he'd had no idea about her plan to gain custody of my kids. He'd known she was making CPS reports, but thought they were legitimate concerns, not fabricated allegations designed to take my kids away from me. The criminal trial lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Computer forensics showed Angela had created the fake medical records. Email records showed her communications with lawyers about custody. CPS workers testified about the suspicious nature of the reports and the fake documentation. Angela's defense argued she genuinely believed the kids were being neglected and had made poor decisions in how she reported her concerns. Her lawyer claimed she'd been driven by mental health issues related to her infertility struggles. The prosecutor argued she'd made calculated decisions over months to systematically destroy my parental rights. Angela was convicted on all counts. She got 18 months in prison and 5 years probation. Her nursing license was permanently revoked. She was ordered to pay $85,000 in restitution for my legal fees and emotional damages. She was also barred from any contact with my children ever again. Kevin divorced Angela while she was awaiting sentencing. He said he couldn't stay married to someone who'd tried to steal his brother's kids through fraud and lies. He moved out of their house, and we've slowly been rebuilding our relationship, though it's been difficult. My kids went through therapy to process everything that happened. Emma had been confused when Angela asked her leading questions during visits, trying to get her to say negative things about living with me. Tyler was too young to understand most of it, but the disruption of investigations and interviews affected him. Angela got out of prison 2 months ago. She's living alone, working at a retail store, and can never work in healthcare again. Kevin told me she's been in therapy and has expressed remorse for what she did, but the damage to our family is permanent. Our parents are caught in the middle. They're horrified by what Angela did, but also struggle with her being family through marriage for so many years. They want Kevin to be able to move forward, but don't know how to handle family gatherings when I've made it clear I never want to see Angela again. Last week, I received a letter from Angela's therapist asking if I'd be willing to participate in a mediation session as part of Angela's recovery process. The therapist said Angela is working on making amends and understanding the full impact of her actions. She wants to apologize directly and hear how her choices affected me and my kids. My lawyer advised against any contact with Angela, said there's no legal requirement for me to participate in her therapy process, and that protecting my kids should be the priority. But the therapist emphasized this wasn't about absolving Angela, it was about helping me find closure. Kevin thinks I should consider it. He says Angela is genuinely remorseful, and that meeting with her might help me process the trauma of what happened. He's still my brother, and wants some version of family peace to be possible eventually. My kids sometimes ask about Aunt Angela. Emma remembers her fondly from before everything happened. Tyler barely remembers her at all. They don't know the full details of what she did, just that Aunt Angela made some bad choices and can't see them anymore. The mediation request is sitting on my desk. I have 2 weeks to respond. Part of me wants closure and to hear Angela take accountability. But another part never wants to see the woman who tried to take my children away by destroying my reputation as a father.